We're recording. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening. It's December 2nd, 2024. This is a regular meeting of the Town Council and will include the State of the Town addresses. The open meeting law allows us to continue holding meetings remotely without a quorum of the council physically present at a meeting location while providing the public with adequate access to the meeting. This meeting is accessible in real time by Zoom, by phone, and as a live broadcast on Amherst Media Channel 9 and live streamed. There are, however, 6 counselors in the room tonight. And given that we have a quorum of the council of those in the room and on Zoom, I am calling the December 2nd regular town council meeting to order at 6:31. I'll call upon each counselor by name. And please, at that point, unmute your mic and say present, and then remember to mute it again. I understand that Pat DeAngelis will be absent. Anna Devlin Gothier.
Present.
Counselor Ette.
Present.
Lynn Griesmer is present. Counselor Haneke.
Present.
Bob Hagman.
Present.
Counselor Lord will be joining us later. Pam Rooney.
Here.
Counselor Ryan.
I'm here.
Kathy Shane is unable to be here tonight. Andy Steinberg.
Present.
Jennifer Taub is also unable to be here tonight, although she may join later. And Counselor Walker is unable to be here tonight. There is no chat room for this meeting. If you have technical issues, please let Athena and me know. To make a comment or ask a question, please click the raised hand button. If technical difficulties arise as a result of using remote participation, Athena and I will decide how to address that situation. Athena will be monitoring counselors' connections. During the meeting, there will be one general public comment period. We're going to move quickly to the announcements. The order of the agenda is as it appears in the public. There are various our next council meeting is on December 16th at 6:30. After that, our next council meeting will not be until January, and that'll be January 6th at 6:30. There are various committee meetings coming up, and those are posted on the calendar. In addition to that, I'd just like to quickly remind you that we will be celebrating the new Mary Maple on our newly renovated North Common this Friday night from 6 at the 6th from 4 to 7. And the lighting of the tree will actually be at 5 o'clock. The Sip and Stroll, also sponsored by the Bid, is on Thursday, December 19th from 4 to 7. Bob, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to let people know that the Finance Committee also has a meeting scheduled for December 10th at 3 p.m. That's if we need it, we don't get through all the business on the 6th.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other changes for committee meetings? Yes, Pam?
I just wanted to note that the CRC meeting tomorrow night is a public hearing for the University Drive overlay. It begins at 6 p.m., unlike our usual 6:30 start.
Thank you. Andy?
Town Services Outreach Committee, from the printed agenda, the meetings are not as indicated. There is going to be no meeting this week on the 5th. The meeting on the 12th is not at the usual time. It is at 5 p.m. to 6:30. It is actually a combined meeting with the Transportation Advisory Committee and the Disability Access Advisory Committee to get responses from staff and the town's consulting engineer regarding the proposed layout for Southeast Street near the elementary school that's being built. And we're adding a meeting instead of the meeting on the 5th on the following Thursday at usual 10 o'clock time. That's the 19th.
So December 19th at 10 o'clock PM AM
Yeah.
is an added meeting. Thank you. Thank you for all those changes. I know that people are in flux at this point. We have no hearing tonight, but I want to make sure that people know there are in the town room, there are 3 people in the audience. On the Zoom, there are 5 people in attendance. And at this point, we are going to move to general public comment. Anyone wishing to speak who is in the town room, if you have not signed up, please do so with Athena O'Keefe, our clerk of the town council. And if you're in the audience and you would like to speak, please raise your hand now. Athena, how many people have signed up?
2.
2. At this point, there are nobody on Zoom, so we're going to go ahead with 2, and the limit is 3 minutes. Let me say that public comments are on matters within the jurisdiction of the town council. Residents are welcome to express their views for up to 3 minutes. The council will not engage in a dialogue or comment on a matter raised during general public comment. Public comments are not reflective of the opinions of the town council. Please go ahead. First,
Deb Leonard, please come up. You want Vince to go first? Vince O'Connor?
please state your name and generally where you live.
Vincent O'Connor, 175 Summer Street, Apartment 12. So I have a prepared statement, from which I'm going to delete some items because of some of the deletions in the council's agenda for this evening.
Please make sure you speak directly into the mic.
Say again?
Please speak directly into the mic.
Okay. So at a prior council meeting, I expressed no problem with spending on roads and sidewalks, but did object to the lack of spending for schools and the proposed allocation by a council majority of the spendable surplus to reserve accounts that require appropriations by a 2/3 council majority. A fair and equitable plan for the distribution of the surplus would be for the council to restore the road and sidewalk spending and to compensate each school district for the false and misleading information that shaped their past year's budgets. And to compensate them, add $200,000 to this year's FY25 elementary school budget to compensate for the manager's cut to the FY24 elementary school budget, and add a $400,000 gift to this year's FY25 regional school budget to compensate for the 8% to 6% reduction in Amherst FY25 regional assessment. And include both appropriations in each school district base for FY26, and direct the manager to include the full amount of both school budgets as voted by their respective school committees in next year's FY26 budget. To the objections, 1, that we don't have the money. Demonstrably false by the town's own presentation at the November 4th council meeting. 2, that the superintendent has not asked for these monies. The superintendent was not here for these events. She was not lied to by the manager. It was the council, Amherst school children, their parents and guardians, Amherst taxpayers, and both district school employees who were misled and deceived by the manager's calculatedly false statements about Amherst finances. And it is we who have the right and responsibility to demand that the council exact compensation.
Thank you for your comment.
Hi, Deb Leonard, District 5, not speaking on behalf of anybody but myself. And I'm going to keep my comments really short. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the council, the town manager's office, Mr. Zomick, the members of the CPA committee and all who have brought forward the process of the track authorization and the order that you're going to vote on later in this evening, seeing the process through its twists and turns to the end for a healthy, smart, well-oriented track for generations of regional students and families to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. With that, we're going to move on to the consent agenda.
Point of information or
sorry.
inquiry on the consent agenda?
I'm sorry?
Point of inquiry?
Yes.
The consent agenda lists on the motion sheet that it needs 9 ayes. Is that correct for today? And if so, then I'm going to request that everything be moved off of it.
No, that's incorrect.
What
It
is the
is-
voting quantum for today then?
It's 7 for today. I'm sorry for
Okay.
the error.
Thank you.
It's good catch, Mandy Jo. Thank you, Counselor Haneke. Okay, the following items were selected because they're considered to be routine. In many cases, they came with unanimous recommendations from committees. I ask that after I read the first motion, if you want to remove an item, you let me know and we will do so. That does not require a second. To move the following items in the printed motions thereunder and approve those items as a single unit. 6A, adoption of the 2024 Human Rights Day proclamation. 9A1, approval of town manager appointment of Lindsay Strongram as fire chief. And 11, approval of minutes, November 4, 2024, special meeting, financial indicators presentation, November 4, 2024, regular meeting. Is there a second? I'm sorry, Mandy Jo, Counselor Haneke, you have your hand up.
Yeah, and another question. Our agenda says that there was supposed to be a waiver of rule procedure 8.6 for agenda item 9A1. Did that agenda item go through TSO?
It did not, so we need to add that to the consent agenda.
The waiver is on the consent agenda. The problem is that we don't have enough votes for the waiver.
We
So we
can't
need-
vote 9A1 until we've waived.
Right, so we need to pull 9A1 off the consent.
If we don't have enough counselors in the room tonight, that item won't be able to be voted.
We may have enough counselors by the time we get to that.
So when we do,
Okay.
then we can save it for when we do.
One counselor is expected to join us around 8 o'clock. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And that will be 9 counselors, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so the only 2 items then that we are putting on here are the adoption of the 2024 Human Rights Day proclamation and approval of minutes. Is there a second?
Second, Ryan.
Thank you. There's no further debate, excuse me. We'll move ahead. Anna Devlin Gothier,
Aye.
Counselor Ette,
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye, Counselor Haneke,
Aye.
Bob Hegner,
Aye.
Counselor Lord is present, not present at the moment. Pam Rooney,
Yes.
Counselor Ryan,
Aye.
Kathy Shane is not present, Andy Steinberg,
Aye.
Jennifer Tom, and Counselor Walker is also not present. So it is unanimous with all counselors voting that are present, and that means there are 8 in favor and 5 absent. Okay. With regard to the resolutions and proclamations, Andy, I'm going to ask, I'm actually on the Human Rights Day proclamation. We had a change in plans, so let me just find it real quick. And we will take care of it. Okay, as one of the sponsors, I'm just going to go ahead and read. Now therefore, we, the Amherst Town Council, do hereby proclaim December 10th, 2024 as Human Rights Day. Be it further proclaimed, We, the Amherst Town Council, encourage our community to embrace every opportunity to reflect and embody the values of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in their work for the community, and urges Amherst residents to celebrate this day with a community reading of the Declaration of Human Rights on the Amherst Town Common on December 10th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. Please join us. We're going to move on to the resolution opposing expansion of the Pioneer Valley Chinese Immersion Charter School. That was not on the consent agenda. So I'm going to place the motion on the table to adopt the resolution opposing the expansion of the Pioneer Valley Chinese Immersion Charter School as presented. Is there a second?
Second, Devlin Gothier.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing, I'm sorry, Counselor Haneke. You need to, yeah.
I apologize. It takes me a while to find the button when so many things are open on my screen. I'm going to oppose this resolution for a number of reasons. Part of it, I believe, is inaccurate, despite having gone through GOL. That part includes the decline, the fourth to last whereas that says that state aid has declined in state support of Amherst schools and Amherst regional schools due to charter state funding. That's inaccurate because at least at the Amherst schools, state aid has increased between 2020 and 2025 by the numbers I've seen. So I'm not sure where that comes from. Maybe at the regional schools, I haven't seen them, but at the Amherst schools, state aid has increased. It has not been a decline in state support, at least as presented in this resolution. The second to last whereas has that FY legislation that is referred to has nothing to do with charter school funding at all. So I'm not sure what its purpose in this resolution is because it muddies waters. The argument that this PVCI has surpluses to me is specious because, you know, the town of Amherst has accumulated over 15 million in surpluses plus another 10 million in capital stabilization surpluses and 5 million this year alone, but we're not saying that's a problem. And the regional school district in the recent past had to actually return money to the town because of its surpluses. So again, I'm not sure what the purpose of that whereas clause is. While people argue that charter schools may have resulted in some budget deficits, to say that they are directly fueling our budget deficits when we know at the regional schools there is a structural deficit that even if we put money back into that this year would be structural every year, whether or not charter school funding is fixed. Just as misleading in this to say that charter schools are basically fueling these budget deficits because they'd be there anyway. The argument that because enrollment has declined for the past 20 years that we don't need expanded capacity makes no sense to me. There's clearly demand. And then there's some other things in here about confusing opposition to charter schools with opposition to an expansion. There's also another charter school that is seeking an amendment to its charter that will potentially cause more Amherst residents to attend that charter school, and that is PVPA. Yet no one's opposing PVPA's expansion. I find it specious to make arguments about this related to a school that has served residents of Amherst, a public school that has served residents of Amherst well, to say we can't have that and we don't need expanded schooling when clearly there are families in Amherst that are choosing to go to this public school, PVCI, because the Amherst public schools are not serving them. The resolution, I believe, is misguided, although I understand the need for a change in the funding formula. But that change and need for it is independent of whether a school that approximately 5% of our town's school-aged children are attending should exist. And there is nothing in this resolution other than a problem and a complaint with the state funding formula that indicates that PVCI is not educating its students well. You can disagree with the point of charter schools, you can disagree with the funding formula, but that does not necessarily mean we should be putting, as I've said before, the families of those people, those children who attend the school at the heart of the budget deficits that Amherst schools and Amherst Regional Public Schools are seeing. And I read this resolution as putting those families at the heart of this issue. And to me, that is just wrong. The families that are going there are receiving a good education. They are clearly not finding what they want at our public schools, and our public schools should do better to find that. And I cannot support this resolution as worded.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Anna, this came out of GOL. Do you have any comments as chair of GOL?
No, I covered the gist of the conversation in the GOL report. We spent a decent amount of time on this at GOL, primarily looking at sources, clarifying sources of data and clarifying numbers that were in the report, as well as some clarity around the differentiation between the Amherst and Amherst Pelham regional school districts and making sure both of those were identified throughout the report. But ultimately, the committee unanimously, with one absent, voted to find it clear, consistent, and actionable.
Thank you. Then we'll move to the vote. And that is beginning with Anna Devlin Gothier,
Aye.
Counselor Ette,
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye, Counselor Haneke,
No.
Bob Hegner,
Aye.
Counselor Lord is absent, Pam Rooney,
Yes.
Counselor Ryan,
Aye.
Kathy Shane is, I'm sorry, absent, Andy Steinberg.
Aye.
The motion passes with 7 in favor and 1 opposed. We're going to move on to our next agenda item, which is the presentation of the State of the Town addresses. This is something we do every year. Athena, were you able to load mine? Thank you. We'll start with mine and then we'll move to the town manager. So actually 6 years ago today, the first town council was sworn in. It was a very celebratory event at the high school. And several of us remain on the council today. Next slide. This is a requirement of the town charter. The town manager will also give its state of the town address. And I'm going to be very brief in mine and highlight a few of the slides. The full deck will now be posted. The next slide, please. So I want to thank the town council. I made note this time of the various councilors and the number of terms they have served. And I just want to point out that Councilor Haneke, Andy Steinberg, Pat DeAngelis, Kathy Shane, myself, and have all served now we're in our 3rd term. Others have served for their 2nd term and their 1st term. I want to thank all of you for the work you do on behalf of the town of Amherst. Next slide. Our meetings are hard to count sometimes because we have joint meetings, but I counted 28. I actually think it's a few more. We have 4 committees. We hold our district meetings on a regular basis. And this year, and we are liaison in this year to 9 actual committees of the town. We appoint people on the planning board, the ZBA, and I want to remind people those positions are always open and coming up every year, as well as the non-voting residents of the finance committee. And this year we had the special task of appointing the Charter Review Committee. Next slide, please. One of the responsibilities of the town council that we take quite seriously, and in fact, this year alone, we have passed 21 proclamations and resolutions. This is one where we are actually at the North Fire Station, and it was in regard to children and child abuse. Next slide. Out of the ordinary, however, this year we had two different times where we had to appoint members to other elected bodies, the Housing Authority and the Jones Library Trustee. Next slide. But we had some special events. One was the celebration of 20 years of same-sex marriage in Massachusetts. And one of our very own on our council, Councilor Pat DeAngelis, was part of that panel. And in addition to that, we had the 30th anniversary and visit from our sister city from Kanagasaki, Japan. Next slide, please. The town manager, I'm sure, will be addressing the goals. We've been talking about them a lot, so I'm going to just move on. We did adopt bylaws and rental registration and nuisance property. I want to give a special shout out to CRC, the Community Resource Committee, for the tireless work in moving these two bylaws along. They have made major changes, and they're in the process of being implemented and or enforced, if you will. The only other thing we did with regard to bylaws, at least by my records, were the fee adjustments on water and sewer bylaws. Next slide. We did adopt some policies, mostly of them relating to speed and safety zones. But in addition to that, we did deal with surplus real property disposition policy. Next slide, please. But we're actively working mostly through TSO on waste hauler, through CRC on solar, on the solar bylaw, and on the University Drive overlay, also with CRC. You heard about the upcoming hearing on that. That is also going on with the planning board. Next slide. Our major capital projects have been made progress, although there's been a few stumbling blocks along the way. And the one slide I didn't include, but would have loved to, and should have, is that of when we were able to cut the ribbon on the North Amherst Library Edition. We still have and have been starting now to discuss issues related to DPW and fire and EMS. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier, we spent a lot of time on our public ways. Pomeroy, North Common, Town Hall, University Drive, and Main Street Roundabout. And in addition to that, signs for two of our higher ed institutions, speed limits, safety zones, acceptance of roads. And one of the things outstanding is to whether or not we will adopt a proposed transportation and parking commission and what their roles and responsibilities will be. Next slide. I'm going to skip this, although it's very important to us. We are a Duke community, and I do want to applaud the continuing progress we are making on both our affordable housing front and the homeless shelter, permanent homeless shelter on the former VFW site. That's thanks to Dave Zomack and several people in the planning department. Next slide, please. What we are going to find this year is the budgeting is going to be tough. And we already know that. Later tonight, we'll be taking our first look as a council at the financial guidelines for the coming year. And there's some tough choices and some significant warnings in those guidelines. Next slide. We continue to deal with one of our major goals on racial equity and social justice. And the Resident Oversight Board is now under discussion by a committee. The charge for that will come forward to the council. There's still money set aside for a youth empowerment center and we still are dealing with recommendations from the African Heritage Reparations Assembly and its follow-on committee. Next slide, please. But we recently had to vote again to refile ranked choice voting, fee or transfer of property, and extending voting rights to lawful permanent residents for municipal elections. Those will now be filed again in the legislature by our state representative and senator. Next slide, please. There are other things in the legislature we're going to be looking for and keeping an eye on. One is an act creating a municipal and public safety building authority. This would help us both with DPW and fire and EMS. And we know that this is something our state representative Mindy Dom and Senator Comerford both support. There's also been a lot of discussion about school funding formulas, pilot legislation, and fee on transfer of property. Next slide, please. But our challenges are many. And one of the interesting things that we have going on this year, which we hope that all of you will participate in, and that is the discussions about the review of the charter. Again, it's been 6 years. We've all learned a lot. There's some things probably some of us would like to see changed as well. And this is the time to have that discussion. So with that, I'd like to go to the last slide and just make sure that we thank our town manager and our staff. We are not always the easiest bunch to deal with. And the staff and our town manager have done so remarkably over these last years. In the process of that, we've had a couple retirements of key staff, and they've been replaced. In fact, tonight, we have the opportunity to vote on one of those replacement, a new fire chief. So we want to thank all of you for the hard work that each of you do at every level of our staff. I want to give a special shout out to Athena O'Keefe, our clerk of the town council. She's patient. She works diligently to keep us on task and is reliable in so many ways that people probably don't completely appreciate. But thank you again, Athena, for everything you do for the council. We have many members of the public who serve on our committees. They do this with a great deal of expertise that they bring from their own professional lives and their own commitment to the community. And Amherst Media has recently gone through a change and has continued to support us in our meetings. And finally, we want to thank our residents. Thank you for speaking up. Thank you for letting us know what's on your mind. Thank you for coming and talking to us. We hope you will continue to do that, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Town Manager Bockelman, it's your turn.
Thank you, Lynn. So we've just celebrated Thanksgiving, so I wanted to start with a short story of thanks. So late Thursday night, my family and I were driving home after a big Thanksgiving dinner at Kathy's sister's house in New York. We came into town on Route 9, turned left past the town common, and stopped at the light at the center of town. It was quiet. It was late. It was a lovely, quiet town. I was thinking about the lighting of the Merry Maple later this week and a celebration that will be enjoyed on our new North Town Common. We had just seen an ambulance on its way to Cooley Dickinson on Route 9, and I was listening to the dispatcher recording to see what was up. As always, the dispatcher handled the call with calm professionalism. As we turned onto Main Street and passed the police station, I said to my kids, look up there, see the lights? That's where the dispatchers are. I mentioned how police officers and firefighters are always, and our EMTs are always standing by, ready to respond to any call for help at any time. Some of the calls that day included an elderly person with high blood pressure, another with low blood sugar, a carbon monoxide alarm at a house, a senior who had fallen and hit their head, and a fire alarm activation at a university building. I felt very grateful for our first responders. They are the ones who have Thanksgiving dinner while in uniform. I felt grateful for the DPW workers too, who were out in the wee hours that holiday weekend de-icing our roads so we could get to our shopping or other destinations. And so I've been thinking a lot about gratitude lately, gratitude for all we have as a family, a town, and a country. And yeah, even when the news is dark, we're fortunate to live in a place as beautiful as this with the relationships we have. Preparing the state of the town leads me to reflect on the year's accomplishments, and that's important. It reminds us that our actions have meaning. Celebrating our progress bolsters our resilience. We need that resilience. It's no secret that it's hard to get things done in local government. It's the unit of government that's closest to the people. Our elected leaders are our neighbors. We all have opinions and we all care and have agency to advocate for what we think is best. It's all too easy for people to take pot shots at you and town staff, especially in this political climate. We're fortunate to have elected and appointed officials who take on these roles. You don't take it on for the accolades, but to make the town a better place. I'm grateful for your leadership. You are doing your job and you're doing it well. So I want to look at a few things that we can, oh, next slide, please. That was gratitude. Next slide. I want to look at a few things that, which we can be proud of. So we broke, Lynn sort of mentioned our capital projects. We broke ground on our new elementary school after securing substantial funding from the state. Now we're ready to begin construction, and we received bids from 3 reputable contractors, all below our budget and with a healthy contingency. While we're going through the bid process, I'm confident you will see construction start soon. And after adjusting the design on the Jones Library, you can go to the next slide. In a renovation, we received a bid that was within the town's budget and also with a healthy contingency. This project too has received substantial commitment of funds from the state, along with millions in other grants and private donations. We have more steps to take before I can sign a contract, but we are working through this process. The town's $15.8 million investment will produce a building project valued at $46 million. And at the last council meeting, we presented proposals to the town council for choosing locations for the fire, EMS, and DPW facilities, along with solid financing options that will advance these projects forward. Things are moving. Next slide. A few years ago, I presented Destination Amherst, a vision to make the downtown more attractive and provide a foundation for an economically vibrant downtown. And we have delivered. The new North Common has transformed downtown Amherst. We created a welcoming green space with park-like amenities that serves as a magnet for gathering. We now have families, visitors, and young people enjoying the center of town in ways we had not seen previously. We have a new playground at Kendrick Park and have completed the associated road, bike, and pedestrian improvements. If you walk by there, so many kids play there every day, more than we ever imagined. And soon we'll have a new modern restroom for those inevitable emergencies that kids have. And right now, the planning department is engaging the community in discussing the vision for the streetscapes of downtown Amherst. And if you haven't taken their survey, you really should. It's really a fun survey to take. It's very easy. You get to compare pictures and choose which one you like better. And I want to recognize that our local business people have really stepped up, making significant private investments in the downtown area by building new housing, outfitting Revive retail spaces, and opening new restaurants. I want to recognize the investment Amherst College and the university are making by establishing visible presences downtown, reinforcing the vitality of our downtown. But this work is not confined to downtown. As Lynn mentioned, we dedicated a beautiful addition to the North Amherst Library, thanks to a generous private donor. Our purchase of the former Hickory Ridge Golf Course and construction of the grant-funded Pomeroy Village roundabout are bringing new life to South Amherst. Hickory Ridge alone preserved 150 acres of sensitive river frontage, provided a handicapped accessible hiking trails that I walked on this weekend, and will soon generate 6.5 megawatts of solar power. To the east on Belchertown Road, we powered up the solar project on the town's closed landfill, generating another 4 megawatts of clean energy, all of it going to meet the demands of our municipal buildings, with the side benefit of our first dog park. Coming up, residents will see a new roundabout at Amity Street and University Drive, partnership with the university supported by a nearly $2 million state grant. And the town council will be making the final decision on moving forward with CPA funds for the new track and field for the regional school district and traffic improvements on Southeast Street in front of our new elementary school. And I want to mention a lesser publicized project, but one of high importance. It's the complete replacement of the town's Centennial Water Treatment Facility in Pelham. People don't notice it very often. And this project is funded in large part by low interest loan and grant from the state. We will have a brand new state-of-the-art facility bringing in established source of clean water to supplement our current reservoirs and wells. Centennial will provide high quality water to the town for decades to come. Next slide. The town is taking the critical need for affordable housing straight on. Lynn has mentioned a couple of these. So the single room occupancy development at 132 Northampton Road has proven to be super successful. And town staff are actively planning for a new shelter with supportive services at the former VFW site. In the pipeline on the creation of 30 home ownership opportunities for moderate income households in North Amherst and the development of 78 units of affordable housing within walking distance of our new school in the East Amherst Village Center. The message here is we are making our town better for generations to come while stretching the town's precious tax dollars at every opportunity by winning state and federal grants, partnering with businesses and other donors, and practicing sound financial planning. Next slide. So managing a complex $100 million organization is challenging. All the initiatives I mentioned, the new parks, buildings, capital projects, are predicated on a durable financial foundation. How do we get that? By strict budget management, including position control, a strategic building of reserves, smart debt management, and credible financial policies. These are the tools of success. Our finances are solid because we've made the hard choices to manage the taxpayers' funds wisely. But don't take my word for it. The bond rating agencies confirm our strong fiscal systems. For every item that's rated that we control, we have excelled. But I don't want to just focus on finances because that's not the only thing we talk about. Next slide. The town is fortunate to have many employees who are among the best in the state, and I can't sing their praises enough. Our staff is a testament to our ability to grow our own leaders and to recruit talent from the outside. Next slide. We have 3 new leaders in our public safety department. Gabe Ting is police chief, Camille Terriak is our press director, and if the town council agrees, Lindsay Stromgren is fire chief. Each brings experience, vision, and integrity to these important departments. In addition, we have our new finance director, Melissa Zawatsky, who's in the audience tonight, who has just jumped right into the work with fervor. And I have already enjoyed working with our bold new superintendent of schools, Dr. Z, who has provided inspired leadership in difficult times. Slide. Like many, we are bracing for headwinds as a new federal administration takes over with values that are likely out of step with the town of Amherst stated values. As Pete Buttigieg says here, in moments like this, our salvation will come from the local and state levels. I have worked for local government my entire career. Keeping the long-term plan an explicit part of the daily conversation makes the short-term setbacks easier to bear. The best way to increase resiliency is to reduce frustration. It's inevitable, you know this as well as I do, that one project or another will be unpopular with at least one group. A colleague likes to say, go hard on the issues and easy on the people. I think it's the attacks, much more than the actual content of any disagreement and the slow pace, that can make town employees and those engaged in the civic process feel undercut and discouraged. We must all do our part to commit to undertaking this work with an attitude of love and gratitude for one another, even those with whom we disagree. Next slide. So relentless optimism is a survival skill that we can all give each other. To those in our community who feel we could go further or move faster, I encourage you to reflect on the progress we've made together. Show me another community that's tackling racial equity and climate action with greater determination, or municipal staff is deeply committed to their mission as ours. We know we're not perfect. We're making strides every day to build a stronger, more inclusive, and better future. I appreciate the opportunity to serve you and the people of Amherst. I'm privileged to work alongside our incredible staff. And still, after 8 years here, when I drive home late at night with my family, I see this lovely little town, and I'm grateful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And I do want to acknowledge that we had a real library of photos to draw from because of Sam Griffin, our new communications director, and also Angela Mills, who often attends our events as well. Again, thanks, Paul. I appreciate the comments and your review of the town. We are going to move on to action items. The first action item, which was about signing a letter regarding Chapter 70 funding, has been removed. It will be back on the agenda for December 16th. The second one is regarding the Community Preservation Act and referral of Community Preservation Act appropriation and transfer order FY 25-08A, an order appropriating and authorizing debt for construction of the reoriented track and field facility known as option 3C at the Amherst Pelham Regional High School. With that, I'm going to call on both our town manager, Paul Bachman, and assistant town manager, Dave Zomack, and want to recognize the CPA committee and Chair Sam McLeod for taking this item up out of order and bringing it to the council, not consistent with other. My mic, thank you. So I'm going to make a motion, seek a second, and then move on. To refer Community Preservation Act Appropriation and Transfer Order FY 2508A, and order appropriating and authorizing debt for construction of the reoriented track and field facility, known as option 3C at the Amherst Pelham Regional High School, to the Finance Committee for consideration for a recommendation to the Town Council by January 27th, 2025. Is there a second?
Second, Rooney.
Okay, with that, we're going to go to the presentation. Paul?
Yeah, I'm going to give it over to Dave, who, in the absence of leadership at the school because of change of people, Dave really took this on and has been guiding it through 4 towns, not just Amherst. So, okay, Dave.
Sure. Thank you very much, Lynn. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Great. Thank you for having me. I'm joined tonight by Bob Parent, our Special Capital Projects Manager. Perhaps Athena could let him into the room if questions do arise later on. Bob and I have been working together on this project with our consulting team at SLR, as the council knows. SLR has been doing a wonderful job, and we've made tremendous progress in the last few months. All along the way, we've kept the new superintendent of schools updated and consulted with her team, including the athletic director, coaches, and staff. We've also consulted with the planning department, the inspections department, and our Department of Public Works, with particular emphasis on our engineering staff there. I want to note that the newest cost estimate for the Plan 3C, which is the plan that we have been moving forward with, is in your packet. Also, the CPA recommendation for the 800,000 in additional CPA funds is in your packet as well. And then there is a draft appropriation and debt authorization order in the packet. As I mentioned, there's been significant progress since we last discussed the project with the council, and we're excited to share this with you tonight and in future meetings as needed. Some of the recent benchmarks that we've passed, we've moved forward on the design, and plans and cost estimates are moving forward with the goal of bidding the project in January of next year, again with a target date for construction of summer 2025. We've moved forward on permitting. We've presented the project and gotten feedback from the DRB, the DAAC. We've presented to the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board, and we hope for positive outcomes from the Commission tomorrow, Wednesday night, and the Planning Board on 12/4 as well. In terms of funding, I did go to the Pelham town meeting, and Pelham fortunately voted for the project with with $99,000 additional dollars toward the project. I'll be at the Shutesbury town meeting tomorrow night, where we have a request in for $136,000 for the project. And then later next week, I'll be before the Leverett CPAC with an application for $176,000 to support the project, which we hope they will take up if it's voted to forward to annual town meeting in the spring. So we've really appreciated all the partnerships of moving this project forward. We're excited to bring the project to the community. We're hopeful about the project funding and sources, and we think we have reasonable, accurate cost estimates moving forward. We understand that tonight's vote is really whether to refer to the Finance Committee, and we're happy to take questions at this point. Either Bob or myself could take those questions.
Questions? Councillor Haneke.
Thank you for the financial update. That was the bulk of my questions of where did all the other CPAs stand. So I thank you for that. I saw that right before the meeting. So now my question is, you've got an estimated project total of 4.47 million. and funding requests of over that, that have been at least approved by CPA committees even, I believe, with Leverett waiting to approve, still in their CPA, but funding requests at 3.5 million fully approved and another 900+ thousand sitting in the legislative bodies basically right now, us and town meeting for Shutesbury. CPA funds have a non-supplant requirement. So I guess one of my questions is, if we vote this before Leverett gets to Springtown meeting and so does Shutesbury, can Leverett even allocate CPA money? If the bids come in at 4.47 million, or should we be thinking about allocating some number that gets us up to 4.47 million if Shutesbury and Leverett allocate their full CPA amounts so that there is no non-supplanting, and that all 4 towns can contribute CPA money. And then the other one sort of is, if the project comes in under budget or under what funding has been secured, who gets to keep the overage? Is there an agreement as to what monies of these, what could end up being 6 or 7 funding sources get spent first or last, things like that. And I know you might not have answers tonight, and this is going to Finance Committee, so I'm happy to wait on those answers, but that's sort of where I'm thinking. And then I do want to say I appreciate, Dave, that you are heading this, and your time and Bob Parent's time, but this is fundamentally a regional school project. And so I guess one of my questions is, as the superintendent is looking at executing memorandums of agreements for uses of things and doing all of that and being more careful with that, I mean, it's kind of blunt, but how is your time being compensated, or is it being donated to the region, and how is that going into this calculation? Your and Bob Parent's time. Thanks.
Why don't we take Pam Rooney's questions if you have them, and then we'll go on and ask for responses, Dave, okay?
There was a lot in that, though. I just wonder whether we're gonna lose that train. Would you mind if we?
No, please go ahead.
So, first off, we'll know tomorrow night, Shutesbury Town Meeting is taking this up tomorrow night. So we'll know on the $136,000 request to Shutesbury, we'll know that before even the Finance Committee later this week. My understanding is if the council moves in this direction, you will hopefully refer this to the Finance Committee, and they will take it up, I believe, next week on the 10th, if I'm not mistaken. But I defer to the chair of the Finance Committee on that. So we've got a little time to process the 136. We will not know, and I think those are great. We will not have answers on some of your other questions, Councillor Haneke, with regard to the Leverett piece. I think we're going to have to think about that a little bit in terms of supplanting. Bob, I don't know if you wanted to comment on any of those questions or comment on anything that Councillor Haneke talked about with regard to, the 4.7.
Sure, certainly I can. Adding to that, I wanted to note that the $4.47 million estimate is based on a 5% contingency amount, which is reasonable for this type of work, but it's a little bit less than would typically be carried forward in a project. Most times we would carry a 10% contingency into bidding at this point. And I did just want to note that if that contingency was increased to 10%, the total project value at that point would be 4.67 million, just under the total of all the requested funding sources from the various communities. So just trying to make the point that there isn't necessarily as big of a gap as there might appear to be between the project estimate and what is being requested from the 4 communities, because we're going with a relatively lean contingency amount.
Before we go on to other questions, I would just add that we will certainly take your questions about, you know, kind of the sequence and supplanting and where does, if all the money is not needed, if the town of Amherst and the other three towns all chip in with their shares and we don't need all the money, we need to address your question about, so who gets monies returned or who doesn't spend all that has been allocated. We hear you on that. And then I don't really have a comment on my time. Perhaps the town manager wants to comment on that, but we are here trying to move this project forward for our community. And, you know, we are at least 80% of this project in terms of funding. So we're trying to make it happen after all these many years for the athletes and the coaches and the broader community. So that's where we are, I think, on that.
Paul, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
No, I mean, the timing of this project was such that, given the sort of changeover of staffing at the school, there was nobody that really there who was ready to take on this challenge. And I thought it was important for us to move this forward. And so I appreciate Dave and Bob stepping up to make that happen. I understand what the Councilor Haneke is saying, and that's something we will weigh as we move forward.
Thank you. Pam Rooney?
Thank you. The existing, I'm going to talk about, first of all, I support this project. Second, I'm going to talk about Tan Brook, which is in a pipe that runs currently along through the fields, the playing fields, and barely touches the existing track. In the new orientation, the new track will sit substantially over the top of Tan Brook piping. So my question is, how are the contractors going to be directed to protect the piping in order to not exacerbate the wet cellars that everyone that I know that lives on the east side of Cottage Street has? So the question is, what protection are you going to seek for Tan Brook piping? Thank you.
I would defer to Bob on that, if it's okay, Lynn.
Certainly. It's a very valid question. One of the first things we did when we got involved in this project was to look at the condition of that pipe. Working with the DPW, we televised the entire length of the pipe through the field, so we have documentation of what the existing condition of that pipe is. You know, we have made certain that we have adequate cover over the top of the pipe during construction, and we'll have the means to do, if necessary, a post-construction video and hold the contractor accountable for any problems that might occur. But we really don't anticipate it. The pipe is in very good condition. It's a reinforced concrete pipe. It looks pretty much as good as it was the day it was installed. But it is a concern. We need to make certain that that pipe isn't damaged, so it continues to serve for many years after today.
Okay. So my question, first of all, let me just say I'm delighted to see this project moving forward. I think it's a terrific project that serves all four of the towns, and not just the students and the athletes that are and coaches, but those people who just go out and use the track. So, but my question really builds a little bit on what Councilor Haneke was, and that is, as we move forward, what is the plan for maintenance of this facility? And how will that be codified in an MOA or whatever the case may be? Thank you. David?
If I could, Lynn, I did neglect to mention that we are currently, I'm working with our finance director and the team over at the region on every CPA funded project in town has to have an agreement, essentially an MOU, a legal document, and we will have a CPA agreement contract between the town and the region on the use of the CPA funds. It will address a number of the issues that have come up tonight, that Councilor Haneke brought up, and we will. I was not 100% sure it would delve into the maintenance, but we can consider that with the superintendent as well. But
Thank you.
there will be a formal contract agreement as is our practice and our policy relative to CPA funding of any sort with a nonprofit or within the town.
Great. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we're going to move, I'm sorry, Counselor Haneke.
Sorry, I was trying to reopen the document I just closed. I'm just trying to look it up. We already gave CPA funds for it. And so I guess, do we already have an agreement? And if so, for the CPA funds, we already authorized for it, the 967,000? And if so, are we looking at a different one, or was that agreement never executed? Again, you don't have to answer it now. Just bring it to finance.
David, go ahead.
I think Bob can partially address that, but because construction hasn't started, we really haven't, other than design money, we really haven't spent but a small fraction of the funds you see in the memo. But let me look into that for finance for next week. I'm not aware that we have an agreement. Again, that was in the hands of the former finance director for the schools. And it may be something that didn't carry forward during that period. But again, Bob, I think our contract for design is approximately 200 and some odd $1,000. It's a fairly small fraction of the overall project. And some of those funds actually were drawn from other accounts that are non-CPA. So we'll have more detail on that next week at finance.
Just adding to that, the majority of the funds that have been spent to date have come from funds that, as I understand it, that the district has on hand, including the Hurricane Boosters account, as well as the initial Pelham CPA grant that had been received. We're just starting to dip into the first round of Amherst CPA funding right now to pay for design fees, but we're really beginning that process right now. So now's the time to really get that agreement in place before we go much further.
Bob Hegner.
Yes, one of the things we discussed when we were debating this a while back was whether we could defer some of the construction in order to keep the cost down below what was then considered to be a threshold. Will we be doing that? Will we be postponing some things? I mean, we talked about maybe postponing the lighting. We could put the base of the lighting in, but postpone the towers and the lights. Will we be doing any of that, or is this funding sufficient to do the entire project?
Bob, why don't you jump in
Certainly.
on alt ads and such? Yeah.
Correct. The number that has been presented, the $4.47 million, which includes the 5% contingency, includes all of the additive alternates. In other words, that's everything we would like to complete. It's still a relatively lean project to be honest. It doesn't have a press box. It doesn't have bleachers. It doesn't have lots of things that you might want to see somewhere down the road at this location. But as a public project, we need to be able to ensure that once the bids come in, we can award the contract within the funding that has been appropriated for the project. And a strategy that's often used is the use of alternates, which we do have. We currently have identified up to 7 alternates that could reduce that 4.47 million, or what the bid number is, by about $800,000. So if either we're not successful in receiving all the funding that we've requested, or we receive bids that are higher than estimated, we have a strategy in place to bring the project cost down so that it would match the available funding.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Then we're going to move to a vote. The motion's been made and seconded. I'll begin the vote with Councillor Ate. This is a vote for referral.
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer's an aye. Counselor Haneke.
Aye.
Bob Hegner.
Aye.
Counselor Lord is not here. Pam Rooney.
Yes.
Counselor Ryan.
Aye.
Andy Steinberg.
Aye.
And Anna Devlin Gothier.
Aye.
It's unanimous of all of those present, so it is 8 in favor and none opposed. Let me just also mention that I assume that any MOA or MOU for maintenance will cover all the money that has been put into this, not just CPA, since a lot of town money has also gone into this and booster money. So thank you again for this project. Thank you both for working on it at the level that you have, and we look forward to it. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going to move on to supplemental budget appropriation requests. Item C1 was removed because it was not forwarded as a recommendation at this time from the Finance Committee. And that's the one that regards a sidewalk equipment for DPW. So we're going to move on to C2, which is referral of Council Order FY 25-04B, an order appropriating a supplemental increase to the Town of Amherst Sewer Enterprise Fund operating budget for the fiscal year 2025. I'm going to place the motion in order, and then we do have presentations. I will mention that there are 3 of these kinds of orders. And so when we do the presentation, one of them will be about the sewer fund operating budget. The next will be about the sewer enterprise fund operating budget for a supplemental increase. And the third one is the solid waste enterprise fund. Superintendent Guilford Mooring, Superintendent of DPW Guilford Mooring, has joined us along with our finance director for this purpose. So the first order is, the motion is to refer Council Order FY 25-04B, an order appropriating a supplemental increase to the Town of Amherst Sewer Enterprise Fund operating budget for fiscal year FY 25 to the Finance Committee for a recommendation to the Town Council by January 27, 2025. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Ette. Please go ahead. Guilford?
So this appropriation, this
We can hear you.
I got a bit of a cold, so sometimes my voice stops. So this appropriation is for $250,000 to cover the cost of sludge removal from the wastewater treatment plant. We opened bids, and the new bid was $25,000 more than we budgeted for, and we had actually put additional money into the budget during the budgeting process because we thought it would go up. We just were off on how much it went up. So this is the money that pays to have the sludge residue taken from the wastewater plant. It goes to a facility in Connecticut where it is disposed of. And that's what this money is for.
Are there questions from the council? Councilor Haneke.
Thank you for indicating that this was unanticipated and that you tried to put this money into the budget. That was one of my questions. So thank you for covering that one. You said 25,000, but the request is for
250,000.
So I was just wanting to clarify that.
Yes.
So the bid was 250,000 more than
250,000.
Can that seems like a lot. Can you tell us how much sludge removal costs in general and how much you had anticipated the new bid would be so that we get an idea of how much it was more than we thought it would be?
So it's now going to cost roughly $1 million a year to remove our sludge. We thought we'd be in the $700,000 to $750,000 range.
Okay. Any further question, Councilor Haneke?
The only one I have is more related to next year's budget. We're going to make sure seems like the second year in a row that the sewer enterprise fund has not done well in anticipating its costs in terms of when we've adopted the sewer fees. So in finance, can you then address, you don't have to do it now, what the department will be doing to anticipate the fees and the expenses better so that we can plan the fees and propose and set fees better?
We can do that.
Okay. Would you please repeat your response, Guilford?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay, thank you. Bob Hegner?
Yes, I was gonna say the same thing. My concern is how are these fees going to increase over time? If you could estimate that, that would be very helpful.
Okay. Are there any other questions on this particular financial order? The vote is a referral to finance. Seeing none, I'm going to move to the vote. Start with Counselor, I'm starting with Lynn Griesmer, myself. Aye. Counselor Haneke.
Aye.
Bob Hegner.
Aye.
Pam Rooney.
Yes.
Counselor Ryan.
Aye.
Andy Steinberg.
Aye.
Anna Devlin Gothier.
Aye.
Counselor Ette.
Aye.
It's unanimous with 8 people voting no, none opposed. The next one, I'm going to read the motion, seek a second, to refer Council Order FY 25-04C, an order appropriating a supplemental increase to the Town of Amherst Solid Waste Enterprise Fund operating budget for fiscal year 2025 to the Finance Committee with a recommendation to the Town Council by January 27, 2025. Is there a second?
Second, Rooney.
Second, Pam Rooney. Would you please speak to this one, Guilford?
So in the solid waste fund and at the landfill, we do a lot of sampling. We sample groundwater, we sample surface water, we sample sediment. We do a lot of different sampling to make sure that things are not getting out of the landfill, and it's required by DEP. The latest chemicals of concern by DEP are called PFAS chemicals, forever chemicals. They told us about January, February last year that they might be requiring us to do this sampling. We are actually having to do this sampling in our wastewater sludge as well now. So we didn't know for sure what they were going to require. They finally gave us some of the requirements, but the budget had already been finalized and was moving forward. And then we got prices. So this is the price to do this testing. It's about $20,000. We'll be doing sampling from the monitoring wells around the landfill to look for forever chemicals in the water, and that's what this is for. We've kind of already started the sampling, and hopefully you approve this and we can finish the sampling.
Okay. Are there questions from the council? Okay. Seeing none, we're going to move to a vote. This again is a vote to refer. Counselor Haneke.
Aye.
Bob Hegner.
Aye.
Pam Rooney.
Yes.
Counselor Ryan.
Aye.
Andy Steinberg.
Aye.
Anna Devlin Gothier.
Aye.
Counselor Ette.
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye. It's 8 in favor and none opposed. The next order is to refer Council Order FY 25-05B, an order appropriating funds for the Town of Amherst Sewer Fund Capital Program, Sewer Collection System and Wastewater Treatment pH and chlorine studies and additional costs associated with Gravity Belt Thickener Project to the Finance Committee with a report to the Town Council by January 27, 2025. Is there a second?
Ryan, second.
Thank you. Guilford?
So there's 3 things that this is made up of. One is the pH study. And when we got our new permit, we had some options in our new permit of how to maintain the pH in our effluent discharge to the river. And we've chosen to do a study of our pH and come up with a way to maximize the operation of the plant to not have to do any, well, to see if we have to do any pH adjustment or if we can stay within the ranges we're operating in now. our new requirement is 6.5 for our pH, and we are just a little around there. So there might need to be some adjustments we have to make in our water that's being turned over to the river. So this study is a requirement of the permit, and then it will also, there will be a follow-on. If we have to make some adjustments, there'll be some design work to install the adjustments that need to be made. But this is kind of a permit required request. It's taken us a little while to work it out with what we wanted to do with our staff and with DEP, and this is why it's coming at this time period. The second one is a chlorine study. We've been having issues for years with our chlorine system, and the staff is really not comfortable with the chlorine system at times. So we decided we should just have a study, see if we want to stay with gaseous chlorine or we want to go to one of two other options, which would either be hyperchlorate or it would be UV disinfection. Those are both options. They both cost money. One's a little less expensive than the other one. But we really think we need to look at what we're doing, make sure our system's working properly, and see if there's a better alternative for the safety of the staff and for the safety of the water we're discharging. Recently we've had more chlorine violations in our effluent discharge than we've wanted. We try not to have any violations, but we probably doubled our violations in the last few years. So we probably had about 5 or 6, which is really not good. 0 is the goal. 0 is what you want to have. So the study is to look at that. We actually having the pH study and the chlorine study go on at the same time. We'll have the engineering staff on board doing it at the same time, which actually is a little bit more efficient. And we won't be paying double the price for the staff to do the study. So we kind of lumped them together to try to do it during the same time period. And that's what we're trying to set up here. We do have staff at the wastewater plant from our consulting engineer working on the GBT project. And we're just trying to capitalize on having all those people there and try to get these 2 studies done as well. The third thing is the money for the gravity belt thickener. We've had cost overruns. We've had some guardrail that needs to be replaced, small things that have to be done that just weren't anticipated in the construction. And then we've had some larger things, some valves that we want to replace, which we found out we really need to replace these valves and make this entire process works a little better. So it's roughly $385,000 for this extra work. The project is still under 10% overall in change orders, so we're still got a good project here. We haven't completely blown the project as the consultants would say, because we're within that 10%. We're under 10% for change orders, but we're asking for this money to make those adjustments. Some have already been made, and some are to be made.
So the motion's been made and seconded. We're going to move to councilor questions. Councilor Ryan.
So Guilford, you mentioned that occasionally there are chlorine violations. I'm just wondering what the consequences of violations are.
The consequences is that we have to explore why we caused the violation and how to resolve it and get back into compliance. If we do too many of them, we will receive a notice of non-conformance and we have to bring the plant into conformance. We have not had a non-compliance issue yet at the wastewater plant.
Okay. Councilor Haneke.
My question is more of a logistical procedural question, and it relates to all 3 of these council orders. Do they need a public forum? And if so, when is that planned for? Since they appear to be appropriations outside of the budget.
They do require a public forum. That public forum will probably not take place until the beginning of January. So I was actually wanted to know whether there was a financial consequence when we're out of compliance.
Eventually there will be. The more you're out of compliance, the more they look at you, and they either will issue a fine or they will make you do some type of other words of evading me right now. But we'll have to have a consent order and get into compliance. And usually a consent order, they come up with, or they tell you to get the changes made so you don't go out of compliance again. They can get expensive, like Springfield and Holyoke and Chicopee have consent orders for their confined sewer overflows. Those are hundreds of millions of dollars worth of work that they're legitimately signed a contract with the EPA and the DEP to resolve. We're still on the low end of the problem scale right now. We're not that bad. We just need to make sure we're showing progress and getting and containing our issues.
I would just say, I hope we continue to do that in a manner that makes sure we never are out of compliance and have some kind of order that comes to us without anticipation and therefore very costly. Counselor, Pam Rooney.
Can someone explain why we would need a public forum on these items when the funding is coming out of the enterprise fund itself?
Please go ahead, Athena.
Because the spending those funds weren't in the budget. And so any appropriation, even if it's from an enterprise fund outside what's planned in the budget, needs a public forum.
And we will be able to lump them all together into one public forum. Okay. So we don't have to hold 3 public forums. Are there any other questions or comments? Again, this is a vote for referral. I'll begin with Council Bob Hegner,
Aye.
Pam Rooney,
Yes.
Councilor Ryan,
Aye.
Andy Steinberg,
Aye.
Anna Dellen Gothier,
Aye.
Councilor Ette,
Aye.
Lynn Griesmers, and I, Mandy Jo Hannick,
Aye.
Councilor Hannicky.
Aye.
It's unanimous.
Thank you very
very
much.
much for joining us, and we hope you get over your cold soon.
I do too.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks. I'm going to suggest we take our break now and reconvene at 8 o'clock. Okay. So we will when we reconvene, we will move on to the town manager's evaluation memo, the draft town manager goals, the draft budget guidelines, and the meeting schedule. Thank you. Please unmute and also turn your video on and turn it back on when you return. We're going to reconvene, please. As you come back, please turn your video on so I know that you're here. George, you have your hand up? Oh, okay. Counselor Ade is working very hard not to turn his sound on. All right, we're all back. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the town manager evaluation and memo. I received a variety of comments and edits and tried to incorporate all of them. If I missed somebody's, I am sorry. Somehow or another, it was a deluge of emails on various different things. But the motion before us is to accept, to adopt the 2024 Town Manager Performance Evaluation as presented in the evaluation memo dated November 26, it should say, not 18, 2024. And so is there a second?
Ryan, second.
Thank you. Now, are there questions, comments, or required changes? Yes, Counselor Haneke.
I was just wondering what was up with the page 3 and 4 practically blank and whether that'll at least get deleted before we send it formally on to the manager.
Great idea. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I didn't realize there was that big blank in there. It's because I took that confusing table out. Yes. Yes, Pam Rooney.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to consider all that has been accomplished in the year and the tremendous amount of work that goes into and toward accomplishing our goals. All that said, it's really pretty awful process, and the outcome in terms of ranking or voting or whatever is it's an ineffective way, because we can have everything from unsatisfactory to commendable based on the perspective of that particular counselor.
Yes.
And so everything essentially gets averaged, and it's not a, it's a very difficult way to gauge uh, actual achievement. So I'm not going to quibble with any of the wording. I just think it's not a great system.
I think we all agree with that one. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move to a vote. And this is an adoption on it. Let's see, I think we're up to Pam Rooney,
Aye.
Counselor Ryan,
Aye.
Andy Steinberg,
Aye.
Jennifer Taub. Nope, I'm sorry. Anna Devlin Gothier,
Aye.
Counselor Ette,
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer's an aye, Counselor Haneke,
Aye.
Bob Hagner,
Aye.
Counselor Lord. Oops, not here yet. All right, it's unanimous. Paul, thank you. I don't think we said one word of thanks when we were doing this before Thanksgiving, but we want to thank you for everything you've done and for your performance over this past year and for the last 8 years. We're going to now, I'm just going to ask Vice President Gothier, Anna Devlin Gothier, to
fine,
talk
there's 3
about
of
the
them.
town manager goals.
Hi, everybody. I'm back to talk about town manager goals again. So GOL will be continuing our discussion on town manager goals on Thursday, the 5th. And what we are going to be getting into in this meeting is our action items. We'll be talking about outcomes, but the goal here is this is our last opportunity to get those action items in. So what I need from folks is to tell me which action items from the last year's goals you would like carried over into this year's goals. I'm prepping a document for GOL that will put the action items in there, and I'd like to be able to include comments from the full council on which ones should be there and if there are any you think should be struck from this coming year's goals as well. As a reminder, action items should be something that to kind of look back at what Pam was just saying, they're not up for interpretation as to whether or not they were achieved. These are things, action items mean you can, without any gray area, say this was done, this was not done. So that's where we're trying to get to with the action items. The outcomes are a bit more broad, and I am continuing to seek feedback on those as well based on last year's goals, or if you have something completely new to add in for this year, please send that to me as soon as possible. Thank you. Looks like there are some questions then.
Counselor Haneke.
Yeah, you kind of answered it, but I was wondering where, if we could get a copy of the updated chart document, whatever you want to refer to, that you were talking about having edited in GOL, because it sounds like you've already put some in. And it's hard to cross-reference or look when I don't have anything more recent than something without any action items already put in. So it would be helpful, since you said in your memo that you wanted tracked changes in a Word version, to have the most recent Word version that was edited at GOL and what came out of that GOL meeting, not what went into that GOL meeting.
Absolutely. I will send that out to the council. It will all be in the GOL packet for this week as well, but I will make sure the council has a copy. Thank you.
Okay. Andy Steinberg.
Yes, when we were in one of our sessions where we were reviewing the goals for this year that's about to end, I made a comment in general terms about several aspects of the goals. And one of them was that I found it very difficult to do what we were trying to do at that point, which was to sort of rank the goals or ones that we thought were particularly important that were actually carryovers for prior years. And I made the suggestion that we really should not even necessarily list them, other than to say that something like continue the good work that you've done on these previous goals, and then narrow the discussion, because they don't need the repetition from the prior year. We know that they're being worked on, that they're complex, that it's not going to be anything that's that we can add to it. And by listing it as a goal again, you kind of, I mean, we wouldn't not list it if there's substantial work that's underway on it. So I would just suggest that we look very carefully at the need to actually list all the goals again that were previously listed. The other thing that I pointed out at the time, I'll just say to complete the thought that I had expressed at that time, that we need to be very thoughtful as we add new goals that are entirely new processes, recognizing that frequently we are then diving into a multi-year process, and we have to assess the capacity to do that. And we also, as we introduce bylaws or policies, that ultimately they kind of turn into goals on themselves. And we need to give some thought to that question too, as to how that kind of process can be thoughtfully dealt with in the same way that we're dealing with this process. So.
Thanks, Andy. And to address that point, in terms of ongoing annual goals, what GOL has talked about is everything should be able to get to that actionable place. And so if something is a continuation from a prior year, there should be specific things that we expect to be done in the coming year. Otherwise, it wouldn't be on the goals. And so, you know, I think that your second point about things that take up time and having the goals be an indicator of how we expect the town manager to use his time is one that GOL is discussing when we think about categories like the administration and leadership area, right? So thinking through, those are the items that are the job duties of the town manager, more of that kind of executive functioning of the town. How do we articulate those so that we can mark them off as complete for that year? But I think what's really important is that we not include vague references to past work, because that's where there's a lot of space for interpretation. If counselors didn't like that work existed, then they're going to have a commentary on it continuing. In the example you gave, right, continue your good work on XYZ. If there are people that didn't like that work in the first place, that's then leading to this situation where we're kind of averaging out all of our scores again. And so we need to be able to have goals that are almost dispassionate at the end, that we have voted on as a council, and action items that it's not, when we look at them, we're not evaluating the merit of the action item. We are evaluating whether or not it was completed. So I think that's the lens that GOL is looking at. And if we're going to have something on there every year, we need to be indicating what it is that is accomplished on that goal in the span of the year.
I'd like to pause for a moment and ask Councillor Lord, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you for joining us. Pam Rooney?
In response to the comments that were just made about the action items, if an action item disappears or is just referenced, I think that doesn't give true indication of the fact that it's still underway. Take, for instance, rental registration, which took 2 years plus to finish. So action was ongoing. I would have not wanted to drop that as an action. Similarly with solar bylaw, that's been underway for now 3 years, 1.5, 2.5, excuse me, only 2.5 years. So to eliminate that and not reference it as yet another, as an action item, I think would be a mistake. It also gives us, by continuing those ongoing activities, it allows us to better see what workload is already there and what new can be piled on. Otherwise it's lost. So that was just response to that. The question to Councillor Devlin Gothier is this our one and only chance to actually, you know, talk about what's going to carry it over, give you new items, or is this just to help formulate the table?
The latter. So this is to help us formulate. This will all come to the council for a vote. But I think, as we all know, it's hard to have those conversations from the kind of the genesis at a 13-person meeting. And so we're trying to get as much input and filter it kind of and format it and all of that through GOL so that what we bring to council has everyone's input in it and hopefully is a little less messy. That said, there's always the possibility that GOL will not vote to include something and someone can bring it back at the council level and say, I wanted this in there, GOL didn't put it in there, put it in there. So this is, Thursday is the last scheduled GOL meeting before the next, the last council meeting of the year, if that makes sense. So the idea would be if you can get any feedback to me before Thursday, that would be great. The 5th this week, yeah. GOL was attempting to meet on the 12th, but there are a lot of other meetings going on. We're gonna see what happens with that. The issues we wouldn't have it. Our staff person is staffing another committee meeting at that time, so we're currently kind of struggling with that timeframe. But unfortunately, we only have the last meeting on the 5th. It will come before the council on our meeting on the 19th. 16th, sorry, 16th. The council on the 16th. So yeah, you'll have something from GOL after the 5th to look at and provide comments on for the council.
Councillor Ryan?
When this finally comes to the council and we vote on it, how does that go? I spent a while, obviously, since I've been around for this, but we do it item by item, line by line. And we certainly don't just vote the entire document. So
We
there's
do.
You do.
We do.
I'm sorry. So
Yeah.
if you're opposed to say, well, if there's an action item that you don't like in this entire document, your only choice is to vote against the goals as a total,
You would present that action item as either an amendment to remove
so
or
there'd
to
be a series
add,
of amendments.
and then it would go up or down, and then you
Right.
basically
So when we're
are,
finally done, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, but there's a series of amendments back and forth. Thank you.
Thanks for asking, George.
are there other questions or comments regarding the goals? Okay, then we're going to move on to the draft budget guidelines. The Finance Committee has been working very hard on this. They have met on several occasions. I know that Councillor Haneke has been one of the major authors, and I've enjoyed listening to the discussion. But I will call on the Chair of Finance, Bob Hegner. Do you want to introduce this? And we'll move on to questions and comments. We are not taking a vote tonight.
Yeah, so as Lynn mentioned, we've spent a lot of time on the guidelines. We spent a lot of time discussing things that are not in the guidelines. So, you know, what you see is a final product or a product that does reflect a lot of discussion. I provided a report as well as the draft guidelines where I tried to lay out some of the areas where I thought there might be questions or we might have moved along. I mean, we tried to stay within the basic guidelines that have been followed by the town, such as, you know, keeping the free cash at 5%, the general stabilization at 10%. We kept the investment in the capital stabilization fund at 10.5%. So there are a lot of things that we did that are very familiar or very similar, but there are some things that we thought we might want to change a little bit. So let me focus on some of those that you may want to get some further discussion of. First of all, one of the things that you have to understand, and what the committee understands, is that the finances, or the budget that the town has, is constantly changing. New information becomes available all the time, and that gives the manager and the finance director much more information to figure out ways of doing things that are a little different. So we tried to set these guidelines as policy goals and let the manager and the finance director respond to the changes that occur. We tried to put the high level guidelines in the executive summary. Some members did not like the executive summary because it doesn't really include all of the discussion around each of the points. And if people only read the executive summary, they might get the wrong impression. So that's one issue, is whether the executive summary is really helpful or not. One of the things that we decided on is to recommend that the town permanently basically increase the baseline funding for the regional schools by the amount that we had put in last year using ARPA funds. And we recognize that this is possibly problematic because we don't want to signal that that the regional school budget is unconstrained. But we did put in a admonition to all budget areas that they needed to really show us over a 4-year period, or up through FY29, how they could manage within the 3 to 4% increase that we normally see in the town. And this will give us some indication of what the stresses are on the budgets as the principals within each of the 4 committee or 4 general areas see it. We recommend freezing the contributions to the town's OPEB liability at the current 600,000 to give us a little bit more leeway for other town needs. One of the issues that we don't really have an answer for right now, but it's coming up, is the elementary school may come in below what we had originally estimated as the cost. And what do we do with that excess money? I mean, some people in town have said you need to return it to the taxpayers because you didn't ask for anything other than construction of a school. Other people have said, well, maybe this is money we could use for some other purpose. So that's something that the council is going to have to have a discussion on. And, we'll probably get some indication of that over this next fiscal year. The town provided financial models. Finance director provided some financial models for how to fund the 4 major capital projects. The town, the committee, discussed these, but did not really reach a recommendation as to which model made sense. And basically, the issue, there's a couple of issues that we saw. One is that the models don't include all of the potential debt that we might incur for some of these projects. The finance director pointed out that she can only put in the models debt that's already been approved, but we know that there's other potential debt out there. So we don't know what the solution is to that yet, but I think that's something where we need to think about what debt is reasonably anticipated that we should put into the models. we did say that the DPW facility is probably the higher priority than of the two, DPW versus fire EMS facility. We also, members of the committee had some concerns about how the town can meet other capital needs within a $3 million cap. We're not sure that that's enough, and we really want to focus in on the 5-year estimate of capital needs that we will get through the JCPC process. And then the final thing is we recommended connection fees for the town's water and sewer systems. The rationale behind that was that, the town has invested a lot of money in our systems, and if somebody comes in and says, "Hey, can I hook up to your system?" we should be charging them some connection fee to kind of, reflect the fact that we've invested in these for many decades. So anyway, that's kind of like the high level thing, but we obviously, if people have specific questions on any part of the guidelines, please, this is the time to ask them. So.
Thank you. Pam Rooney.
Thanks. Just a couple of items, and one is I would encourage the Finance Committee to consider adding something to the effect, whether it's in section 6 or in this section under sort of the budget guidelines, and that would be to ask the town manager to give a free cash estimate or a surplus estimate by April 1. So prior to the requirement of submitting his budget by May 1, so that we have a much better sense of, that'll be the beginning of the fourth quarter, we'll have a much better sense of actual surpluses and actual expenses. We have for several years seen really healthy end of year, call it free cash. And I think many people are uncomfortable that it's not a well-guided process. So we end up with some pretty arbitrary, with conditions obviously, but not necessarily programmed expenditures. The second is I would strongly encourage maybe draft modeling by the finance director to include all potential debt, not just the approved debt. I think what comes to my mind is the potential for some additional debt for the library if funds are not raised by Jones Library itself, and that what will the town be held accountable for, since we are the ones signing the check essentially. Those are my 2 items. Thank you.
Councilor Ate.
So I'm looking at page 1 of the budget guidelines, which on the bottom of the page at the expense projections, it reads to prioritize increasing the Amherst Regional Assessment FY25 base to its full FY25 assessment amount, that is assessment plus additional support, prior to calculating the 3% year-over-year increase. My question is, if we are now having what is called the full FY25 assessment amount, does that mean that previous years we didn't budget to the full amount? And so in that sense, what changed between last year and this year, whereby last year we didn't expect to use the one-time gift as an addition to calculate the base, if that makes sense? I'm tripping over myself, but the point is, it says here that it's the full FY25, which means previous years it was not full. What changed in the discussion this year to make this determination?
Bob, did you want to address that?
Yeah, I think I don't want to speak for the committee, but I think the sentiment was that the schools need some short-term money to get through a crisis. They have a new superintendent who's working very hard to get the budgets in line with the annual growth of our revenue base. But the consensus was, or the sentiment was, we can't get there this year. So it was to try to give the regional schools a little bit more money to get them through the crisis. But we did emphasize that they have to come back and tell us what their projections are over 4 or 5 year period in order to see whether they're going to be able to get down to a 3 or 4% increase or not. I think that would then, we're leaving open what we do next year as a consequence of seeing these projections. I mean, if we want to take a hard line, we can take a hard line and say we're only gonna increase it 3% over what our baseline was prior to the ARPA money that we put in. That's the choice that we have, or somewhere in between. Does that answer your question, or?
Councilor Arce?
It does, but if that becomes the new base, then that is permanent, or is there a possibility that that is going to be
Yes.
adjusted? If so, then maybe the language needs to be clarified so that we could have that expectation.
Well, again, you're looking at okay, we'll try to clarify that. If you look down as to where the projections are actually in the document, besides the executive summary, we try to put more context around that. This is one of the problems with the executive summary that I mentioned earlier, that some people objected to the fact that there was an executive summary, because it can be, you read one sentence in the executive summary and it may not convey all of the nuance that you want to convey around that particular topic. So, but we'll see for what we can do to clarify.
Okay, Councilor Ryan?
So first, thank you, Bob, as chair, and also to the committee for doing this work. It is really, really important. I feel like every morning I'm going to be reading this document before I set off to do my work for the council, or whenever I do that work. But I do have it's kind of following up on Councilor Ede's comment. I think I dug deep into the document, and on page 2 of the document I'm looking at, and it says basically our schools must address already identified structural budgeting issues resulting from the decline in student enrollment and the recent use of one-time funds to supplement operating budgets, which I agree with. Then, but in the budget guidelines, the executive summary, as Councilor Ede pointed out, we see that a one-time use of monies is being basically put into the base. And so I guess the only way I can make that make sense and explain it to my constituents who have questions about this is that this money, even though it seems to go in contradiction to what you say in the bulk, in the heart of the document, is actually making up for some other structural problems that's why you're doing it. I guess I'm trying to make sense of the larger principle in the document itself, with the fact that we are adding 355,000 to the FY25 budget, and that money was clearly one-time money. So could you help me? How would I explain it to my constituents? That would seem in contradiction between what we're asking the schools to do and what we're actually recommending.
Bob, do you want to take that, or Counselor Haneke also has her hand up? I don't know if it's because she wanted to try to answer that question. She's shaking her head yes. You want her to, Bob, do you
Go
want
ahead.
her to take
Go
it
ahead.
on?
Go ahead, Counselor.
The reference on page 2 to the recent use of one-time funds, was not necessarily a reference to the ARPA funds. It was a reference to the schools both using ESSER funds for multiple years for operating budgets. We knew we were violating our policy with the use of ARPA funds when we did it last year, as you well know. I think we actually mentioned it in here too. But I guess one way to look at it in contradictory manner is when we voted the ARPA funds, we knew there was not an operating budget for them at that time, and that this could be problematic structurally from a council point of view, from a holistic budget point of view, because, and that's why we wrote the letter last spring. But to try and, I guess, correct our use of one-time funds, not the school committee's use, our use, we are now trying to prioritize any additional funds that could potentially increase overall operating budgets, or with the decrease in OPEB by $50,000, or with other potential revenue sources and state aid increases that might come in as this budget is better finalized. That our attempt to correct that is to prioritize putting that additional potential revenue or decrease in expenses from other locations into the region's budget to make up for the use of one-time funds. So you could almost look at it as, we recognize we also created a structural issue within our overall town budget. And this guideline is to try to fix the structural issue we created as a town council in funding part of the region's budget with ARPA money, one-time funds from the town. It is not an attempt to correct the regional school committees or the Amherst school committees' structural issues that they have by using one-time ESSER funds that they've been doing.
Can I try a clarifying question that is in the same area? George?
Go ahead.
So last year, in addition to the percentage that we gave everybody, we also gave the regional schools an additional amount of money. I believe it was 400,000 or something like that.
355,000.
Thank you. 355,000 of ARPA money. And what this memo is suggesting is that even though at the time we did that, we said we did not want it to go to the base for the coming year. In fact, this memo is saying we will now put it to the base. Am I correct?
What we should be saying, if we didn't clarify it, is that that's a priority if we can afford it, basically. You know, we recognize that the budget is going to change over time. We don't have to finalize the budget. We won't finalize the budget until May or June. And at this point in time, it's a priority if the money is available in order to do that. We don't want to use one-time money, you know, if we can't afford it. That's the point. The point is, if we can afford it within our operating budgets, let's see if we can do it, you know?
Could I clarify a little bit more?
Go ahead.
Please.
It's a priority after everyone gets 3%.
Right.
So
Right.
it's saying you can't make this a priority if that would result in all the operating budgets not increasing by at least 3%. But once you've given those 3%, the first priority is add that 355 in before you do anything else.
So if I was a member of the school committee, which I am not, how do I know when I can count on that 355 being part of the base? Is it January? Is it when?
When the budget is finished. We
So in
won't
other
know.
words, I'm supposed to go through my budget planning process on the school committee with the hope that it's there, but I could find out in June that it wasn't. Town Manager Bachman has his hand up.
Thank you. The next time you will see a significant adjustment in the projections is in January, after we see the governor's budget come out and after we get our health insurance. Those are two big numbers that will give us a lot of guidance. So I think that would be the time frame when everybody would get updated numbers and see what it looks like at that point in time.
So do you expect that we would then hear from you as to whether or not we can go to that 355 additional to the base?
We will be sharing out the updated projection sheet to everyone. That will include more certainty on our health insurance and more clarity, or the first number from the governor's budget. That could be good news or bad news. We don't know what it is. So it will just give us more information.
Okay.
So the health insurance could be higher. We sort of chose a midpoint. It could be higher than we anticipated. So we just don't know.
So just to summarize, what I'm hearing is that this is a wish that we will be better able to confirm whether it might be a reality in January, toward the end of January.
If I understand, Councilor Haneke said, our first goal is 3% across the board. Our next goal is to hold, to replace that one-time money from last year, and then work sort of trickle down from there. What happens next? What happens next?
Okay.
That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you. That I have other questions, but George, I'm going to go back to you.
What I'm hearing is that we created this problem and we're trying to fix it, which is not my view of what happened. I would like to help the schools, and I certainly hear the thought that we're making their job, difficult job as it is, even more difficult if they don't really know what the base is going to be. So at some point, hopefully, maybe in January, we can give them that kind of certainty. I'm not sure I agree with the idea that we created this problem, but if it would help the schools get through, what I'm hearing also is that this would help them get through this coming year, and that hopefully they will then do what they need to do to address these larger structural issues with our help and support. So that's where I'm at. I have one other very brief, if I may.
Please, go
Thank you.
ahead.
Under, if I can find it quickly, under budget surpluses, you point out in your document that it's prudent fiscal management to aim for a 5% budget surplus each year. If the town meets this target, the year-end surplus would be approximately $5 million. The council accepts that these are one-time funds that should not be used for ongoing operating expenses. This is just my terrible memory, but that is about what we have. Is that correct this year? About 5 million? So what this seems to say is that the town manager is following a prudent strategy, and 5 million is about right for what we would expect. And I heard in the last meeting that some people felt that somehow this was not appropriate. So I guess I'm trying to, is it the finance committee's view that in fact what the manager is doing is not only prudent, but they encourage it, they support it, and that the 5 million we have this year is welcome and a sign of prudent fiscal management that they would like him to continue to pursue? Because I heard something different last week from some of my colleagues. Whenever it was, 2 weeks.
Bob, did you want to address that?
Well, that is what we consider to be good, prudent fiscal management, yes. And it's been part of the, I mean, a 5% budget surplus is not, it's not outrageous, given all the uncertainties that we have. And we want to encourage the manager to continue to budget conservatively in order to not wind up in a situation where we run a deficit. So, we we can always argue whether we can argue whether we can get that down to 4% or 3%. In other words, spend the money rather than save it and move it forward. But when you think about the where we get the savings from, the 5% from, some of it's investment, some of it's positions that are not filled. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty around that, so we can't ever guarantee that we're going to get 5%, but it is a reasonable target.
I see two other counselors that are on the Finance Committee with their hands up. Did you want to comment on either of these items? Andy or Counselor Haneke?
Just going to comment on the school, regional school question in particular. I think that there's an additional element that we're not discussing. And by the way, I should disclose that I was not at the last Finance Committee meeting because of a family emergency. And I regret that I wasn't part of the discussion, but I did keep up with it and talk to the chair both before and after the meeting. The regional school budget is not just an Amherst enterprise, it is a 4-town enterprise. And so as we develop policy, we need to think about Amherst, we need to think about the region, and we need to think about where there are partner communities are on their issues, both internally and in support of the region. And last year, the clear statement of 3 towns, the 3 other towns, was that they wanted to have the increase that was voted, and they were prepared to support it. We were really in a very different financial position at the time, and the only choice we had was to use one-time money to make up the difference that had not been in the prior budget, to allow the budget to go through with the support of all 4 communities. And we made that decision. We don't know what the expectations are of the other towns, but we have to at least be prepared for the view of those communities that it is a part of the base. So I think that the prudent thing to do is, at least until the next 4 towns meeting, to be thinking in terms of that is what we should do and need to do, because otherwise we're going to have a problem as the 4-town process proceeds, which we don't control in its entirety. It's a 4-town enterprise. So I think that's the other thing that needs to be considered as you address this issue.
Counselor Haneke, did you want to speak to this too?
I wanted to speak to the 5%. It's one of the new additions to this document this year, as in fact, the entire budget surplus section is a new addition to budget guidelines, given the conversations we've had. And this one, as the document says, finance hasn't voted the document or recommendation on this document yet at all. We're still working through it, but it was time for the council to see it. This is what the manager said is sort of a reasonable surplus at the end of a year. Maybe it could be worded to up to a 5% budget surplus. But it's an attempt to, even if someone at smaller or lower, as the chair said, we should discuss whether that's the number we think is the up to number maybe, but it's an attempt to recognize that when surpluses come in, that it's not bad if it's up to a certain number, that's actually prudent. And as our budget increases, I think in the last 6 years, we used to have like an $85 million budget or an $80 million budget. It goes up. You know, when we started 6 years ago, it might have been a total of about 80 million, and now we're around 100 million. That additional 20 million adds in a percentage $1 million or so to what a 5% is. And so I think it adds about that, but it could add less. But as the budget gets higher, the 5% gets to a larger number that in raw numbers seems really large, right? But so this is an attempt to recognize that as our budget increases, a typical surplus that would be seen as prudent could look like a large amount of money that we're leaving on the table for operating expenses. So I see it as a way to acknowledge that these larger numbers in the fall that we're seeing is actually, since the town budget is getting larger, actually more reasonable than it might seem on a raw number basis. But we as a council should make sure that that 5% number is something we agree with. It's what the manager said a couple weeks ago. It's what our finance people have said. So it's the number that's in there without having had a large number of conversation. But it's more of an attempt to stop us, including me, every year. I will acknowledge that it's me a lot of the times from saying, is this too much? To ground that in some sort of policy somewhere.
Pam, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to clarify that the 5% budget surplus that is being discussed is different than the next paragraph, which is supporting closeout transfers that prioritize maintaining free cash at 5% and general stabilization at 10%. I read the 5% that we're discussing as different than those two. And I need to be corrected if I'm wrong.
Bob or
It's a different,
Councilor? Yeah.
it's a different 5%. Yeah.
So in other words, the commitment is to the two other goals plus 5%.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes.
Yes.
And, you know, for example, we did not put anything into the general stabilization, with any of the free cash into general stabilization this year because we had 10%, more than 10% in there. So that's where we need to make sure we maintain over time is 5% free cash, 10% general stabilization. In addition to that as a goal, we thought a surplus, so to speak, of 5% is a reasonable target year on year, year in and year out. I mean, that's a reasonable, we could amend that to say up to 5%. That's fine. But the idea is to try to put some expectation that we use conservative budgeting in order to generate surpluses every year, and that's not a bad thing.
Thank you. Pam, did you have a further question on that?
Yeah, so that counters what I was advocating for earlier, which is to be more careful, more targeted with what we think our projection numbers are so that we come in closer to the end line with, I was thinking 0 would be good, but I'm saying here that we have 5% free cash, we have 10% stabilization, and we're aiming for an X% budget surplus. So I'm just saying, I think it's counter to what I was envisioning. Thank you.
Counselor Haneke, did you have a comment on this?
Yeah, so this section is meant to say, and I think it does, that first sentence needs reworded. I think it could be reworded to, as Bob was saying, it's prudent fiscal management or it's reasonable to have an end of year budget surplus of up to 5%, something like that. That doesn't say we're aiming for it. We're not trying to say, we expect every year to have 5 million because we're so conservative that we're trying not to spend the money. But that if we have up to 5%, that's a reasonable thing to see, because we don't want to be in the negative. But you asked about the next paragraph. The next paragraphs, those budget surpluses, that if you have a surplus at the end of the year, the next paragraphs say, this is where you start. So the next paragraphs say you start by making sure we have 5% in free cash of an operating budget. Then you go to, do we have in general stabilization 10%? And then after that, you talk about the reparation stabilization fund. Is there money left over after you've met those two to do that? Then the opioid. And then after that, it's the after that we got sort of discussed this year, that we're trying to figure out what are our guides to the manager if after those 4 things are done, because there was a budget surplus, and there's not always going to be 5 million. Some years it's less than 1 million, and you might be done after general stabilization, right? But if there's more, what is our guidance for the rest of it, if there is more? Because that's what we have been missing in these fall transfers, is any guidance from the council.
Yeah, I want to point out too that sometimes, and Paul, you can confirm this. Sometimes we have to dip into free cash during the year, and so we want to replenish it at the end of the fiscal year, and so we're not running it down from the 5% to 2% or 1%. So yes, I mean, what Councilor Haneke said is correct. We're trying to put some, if we want to make sure that we replenish, if we have money to replenish, so that we replenish free cash and general stabilization first, and then do the other things. And then the question is, what do we do if we have money afterwards?
Thank you. Counselor Ate, you have your hand up.
So I just had a question from page 4 that speaks about, we also recommend budgeting OPEB at the FY25 allocation of 600,000. We recognize that this will slow OPEB funding, and it goes on to speak about the justification with that. But I'm wondering, what is the effect of slowing down OPEB funding? What exactly is OPEB?
Okay, OPEB it's money being spent on retirees, and basically OPEB is essentially health insurance. There's a little bit of other stuff in there, but it's mostly health insurance. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but we have a liability that's currently unfunded, and so we're trying to put money back into this liability, to reduce our liability so that we're fully funded in OPEB. So the town managers originally proposed we increased we did 600,000 last year. He proposed we increase that to 650,000, so that we could get to the finish line faster with that. The language here that it will slow is comparing the 600,000 to the 650. It really isn't any it's the same amount that we put in last year. And this is important for our bond rating as well, that we continue to, we don't want to like drop it down to 300,000. So we wanted to maintain it at a level where the bond, the bond raters say that's good. You guys have a healthy approach. Now, Paul, we may have to increase that at some point, but in order to maintain our bond rating. But our understanding is that it wasn't 600,000 would be okay for the bond rating. Is that correct?
Paul?
Yeah, so I think the plan, I wouldn't say token amount, it's a basic amount that we contribute to OPEB. OPEB stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. So people who retire, the town says we will pay for a portion of your health insurance. That's a liability that we have that gets accounted for in our books. And we do an assessment of that every couple of years or so. The plan is that once we fully fund our pension, the money that's going to fully fund our pension will then be switched over to really carve into the debt or the liability we have for health insurance, OPEB. So the plan is, but that's not going to be for till 2032, I think it is.
George, did you have other comments?
Yeah, I'm sorry, just if I may, just to go back to section 6, budget surpluses. I appreciate very much this being put in the document. I think that this could be very helpful, and it certainly focuses us in our discussion. I'm wondering if Paul were to if he followed this guidance this year. I'm looking at that last paragraph where it says, after meeting the above transfers, we recommend prioritizing allocating the bulk of the surplus revenues to this fund. That refers to the capital stabilization fund, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if Paul were following this guidance this year, the $1 million that he had suggested we put to roads and sidewalks, he would have put it into the capital stabilization fund. Is that what this guidance would tell him to do? Am I interpreting that correctly?
Paul?
No, that $1 million was going to come out of the free cash that we had set up. Yeah, we'd be spending some of the 5 million free cash. Yeah,
It's a completely different kettle of fish.
Mhm.
So this guidance you wouldn't be following this in this case. It's not what they're saying here would not guide you in making that decision. You would.
So free cash will be once we hold our free cash at the 5%. We hold that unless we in the case we need something for something during the course of the year. And so one of the things we came to the council with is, how about $1 million in free cash for the roads? Right. The council said, no, we're happy with where we are on roads. And so so it didn't really, this is not money that would have otherwise gone into the capital fund.
George?
Maybe this is something I'm just going to have to discuss at some of the, it's late enough, but I'm just struggling. I'm just seeing if this advice, because then it goes to say you may choose to propose expenditures outside of these recommendations. And if so, we recommend you allocate it yet somewhere else. But what Paul's telling me, if I understand him, is this advice refers to another pot of money. It's not what we're dealing with right now. It's not the free cash issue that we dealt with last time. This is something else. And this advice, this guidance would not be applicable.
When we receive free cash, we periodically have had financial orders of how to use some of it before it's then the balance of which then goes into reserves. So, or we put it into the capital fund or whatever, but it's spent before it goes to those funds. And so the road financial order that was before us was from free cash. When we don't spend that money, it then goes into reserves unless we direct it differently. Councilor Haneke, you have your hand up again.
Yeah, so the intention, which maybe the town manager doesn't see, but the intention of this entire section is to say, when free cash is over 5% at the end of the year after it's being certified, The first thing you do is make sure free cash stays at 5%. The next thing you do is make sure stabilization, general stabilization stays at 10%. The next thing you do is reparations should get, if there's still money above 5% in free cash, then reparations gets its cannabis equivalents. And then the opioid settlement funds get its opioid funds. The revolving fund gets the opioid funds. If there is still money in free cash that is above that 5% limit, the bulk of that should go to capital stabilization. But if you don't want all of it to go to capital stabilization, what it should do is not come to the council in new financial orders immediately. It should go to supplement the capital budget in the next year's capital budget and budget in the, so for this year, it would be, we would not have seen a roads, a waste hauler, or a sidewalk equipment financial orders. Instead, if Paul had wanted to not put all of it into in an additional 1.2 plus million into capital stabilization, he should allocate that in the next year's FY26 budget, both in income from free cash and in expenses in the capital budget money from reserves line to supplement the capital budget, so that all of the those additional funds get to go through the JCPC process with JCPC accountability, advice to the manager on how to allocate them, recognizing that the manager does not want to go through a new JCPC process every November, but that just proposing things does privilege some departments over others, and that everyone should be able to consider that those funds in a timely manner with advocacy around all of it, so that people aren't privileged. So that might not be how it reads, and if it doesn't read that way, we need to redo the wording, but that was the intention of what this section is saying.
George, did you have any further questions?
That's what I thought it said. And I think that's something we need to think about. Paul needs to think about, but that's how I interpreted it.
Okay.
So thank you, Mandy, and thank you, Paul.
Andy, do you have questions or comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to point something out because it never really gets much attention. The town has a separate policy that has existed from before we were council, which is financial management objectives and policies. And those were adopted back in around 2007, 2008, I might have roughly. And the 5% free cash after certification of free cash from the prior year, and 10% is a minimum for the General Stabilization Fund, was originally established then. And there was then essentially a modification to that policy, which was to create the Capital Stabilization Fund, and anything that was additional above the 10% was to be directed in that. And we didn't, I don't know if the financial policies have been formally modified, but if they haven't, that is certainly, since the recommendation was made with the former finance director, Sean Mangano, what we have been doing. One of the things that I have been told by many town managers and finance directors over time is that the existence of those policies and our adhering to those policies is part of the reason, not the whole reason, but part of the reason that we are respected and get a AA positive rating. So I just wanted to share that additional information.
Thank you. I have a couple comments about this document. First of all, I think it's done, you've done an excellent job. I'm glad to see the ongoing commitments to the percentages that have been laid out in that financial policy that Andy just spoke to. And also to the ongoing capital fund. With regard to the schools, I'm not opposed to the possibility that we add in the the money from last year from ARPA into the base. I just want to make sure that we're sending a message to the schools that they can deal with, that as they go into their budget process, they know what we're saying. And they also know that maybe in January, it could get a little tighter. That was really the nature of my question in there. It was not to suggest for any moment that I don't support the schools. While we're on the subject of the schools, I personally would like to make sure that if we have excess from the elementary school, that we determine what is legally allowed based on the vote that we went to the people with. Is it legally allowed for us to use that to help with the entrances and exits? In other words, the Southeast Street, whatever is decided there. It seems to me like that would be something that's legally allowed. If it is, let's make sure it is. And if that is something that needs to be done to make the school more accessible, then maybe that's a good use of the money. Otherwise, I don't think legally there's much more you can do with it unless you just want to put more solar on the school or something. I want to speak to the financial model, and that is that money, it costs money to borrow money. And sometimes we are the banker because we have the money and therefore we don't incur interest to borrow money. Other times we borrow money because we don't have that money, or it would mean we would put our other reserves in jeopardy. So when we speak about certain projects having bond, money that we have to use to borrow money, it's maybe because that money or that project has a different cash flow than another project has. And for instance, the school pays upon certain milestones. The library, on the other hand, pays 6 equal amounts of money on a regular basis. And the MOU for the library covers the fact that at a certain point in time, the library trustees have to come up with a balance, not leaving the town. So understanding that we are sometimes the banker means that that doesn't mean we're not having cost to borrow money because we're not going to be investing that money elsewhere. It just means we're using our money differently. So that then going back to the financial model, I would really like to see the council commit, at least initially, to a financial model with a clear understanding that it could change. And I mentioned this when we did the financial model discussion. For example, if we went with option 2 or 3, at some point in time, should someone or some institution provide us with a significant gift, or the state would come in with a significant grant program, it might mean we can convert rapidly to model option 4. But meantime, we need to signal to our financial people and to our town manager what path we're taking, at least initially, with the understanding that we may have to change down the road. And I just really want to applaud another piece in this document, and that is the cost of joining our water and sewer system. Those are major capital investments. We can't just let people come in for the price of the monthly fee for usage. It's got to have some kind of membership to join. Let me just check my notes and see if I've covered everything I want to do. I have a few other things that are just more editorial that I'll send to the committee. Councilor Haneke?
If people have specific comments, we're open to receiving those.
Yep. Okay, Councilor Haneke.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the model. the reason it's worded like this in here is because the finance committee hasn't really discussed the
Mhm.
modeling much at all. Bob mentioned it a little bit, but we've been focused on so many other things and already meeting
Yeah.
for longer than 2 hours a week that we haven't been able to. And it was a recognition that in the model that was presented to us, we kind of need more information. Because that model kept borrowing costs that only would have been, the borrowing part of it was only what had been authorized. And so, for example, the borrowing section of that model did not include projected needed borrowing for the region, for what the region, like, that's even within our 5-year capital plan that shows that increase up to 800,000 a year from the 400 it is now. It's not in the model at all, which means that increase is within the 3 million part of the model. And I think we wanted more information about what those borrowing projections are that were already in the capital improvement plan as projected, and how that would affect what's actually available for cash outside of that. So how much would that decrease the 3 million to something else? Because we've already projected, 800,000 or more for this, or extra borrowing for Crocker Farms roof in 2029, or this or that, what those projected numbers are. Can we get better numbers for that? And then what's left over for everything else, because we were unclear what that was. And so we just needed more time to talk before we could
Yeah.
figure it out.
And that's my understanding. I'm just encouraging that we at some point make a commitment to a model so that we don't leave it out there. Just as I want to also bring up the fact that I know that this document is not going to make a commitment to whether we're going ahead with the proposed location for fire and DPW, but in fact, we need to make that commitment. Are we going forward with DPW as a replacement? Dispersed throughout other locations, but using the existing DPW site? And are we going ahead with fire using the Hickory Ridge site? Because you cannot do schematic design without a site. And that's very important. Anyway, Pam Rooney.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that very last point, and that is we have seen none of the analysis on the use of any of these sites. We have only heard talking about them. We've not seen a master plan for Hickory Ridge that shows us maybe in rough acreage what activities could be accomplished there. We've not seen any kind of analysis that that might show the breakdown of DPW configurations and or functionalities. So we've talked about it being split into several sites. We've just never seen any data. So I would feel really awkward saying, yes, I'm going to support option or plan B for the DPW when I have not seen any information or options that have been thought about.
Mhm. Okay. Are there any other comments on the guidelines? Is there anything else that the Finance Committee would like to hear us talk about? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move over on. Yes, Pam.
I brought up earlier, I would like very much to ask the Finance Committee to look very carefully at the Jones Library funding, the status of contributions that have been made, and the plan forward. If it's going to be a success, let's make sure that the Finance Committee has considered it in a way that covers our tail when and if we need to put additional funds into that project. So that's something that I think Finance Committee could very much ask for and better understand.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you. We're going to move on to next year's calendar. I'm going to ask the clerk of the town council to put it up on the screen. This is the calendar has a lot of moving parts to it. Let's just put it that way. If we still feel that there needs to be more work done on it, we do not have to vote tonight. However, there is a point where we do have to vote, which is the latest next meeting. I'm going to call on Pam Rooney. You have your
Lynn-
hand up.
Lynn, if I may, just quickly to introduce it. May I?
Please.
So, in your packet, you'll see the PDF of this calendar, and then on the next pages, there's notes explaining why I had proposed each of these dates. The council rules indicate that the meeting should be held on the first and third Mondays, but there were various holidays and other things that happen on Mondays, so things were shifted around. Sometimes there was a month where a meeting could be held on a first or third Monday, but that would mean holding 2 meetings in a row, back-to-back weeks. And on our end for staff, it's difficult to do that. So I had proposed different changes in there, and you'll see that in the notes. And then there were also some considerations for town and religious holidays. It's just unfortunate that those happen on Mondays usually. So we have to shift those dates around. And I would request respectfully that the council consider breaking up those meetings instead of holding them back to back when possible. It's just easier for all of us. It's a lot of work doing them on back-to-back weeks. Thank you.
And thank you for spending the time on this, Athena. Pam, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. The only discrepancy, and thank you for the comments. So this is comment A010. And you do note that September 8 and 25 avoid back-to-back meetings, yet on the left column, it says September 8 and September 15. So you might just want to update the 15 to a 29 per your note. And the second comment was, I've never heard.
Hold on, just September.
It's September, right now it's the September 8 and 15. And the note to the side says that September 8 and 29 avoid back-to-back meetings.
Oh, you're correct. That's not the issue. The issue there is that Rosh Hashanah comes in the middle of it. That's the 22nd.
Right, but so on the left, it goes August 18, September 8.
Yeah.
And it, I think, should say September 29, according to the text on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
And I've never heard of avoiding Three Kings holiday as something to avoid.
Something
Three
the
Kings-
schools have given off.
Three Kings is an Amherst Schools holiday.
It is.
There are staff members who enough staff members who observe that holiday that they decided to leave that as a holiday. It's in my understanding is that in the Latino community, it's a big holiday, and so that was taken into consideration when I prepared this.
Okay. Counselor Haneke.
So there's going to be a back-to-back meeting, whether it's September 15th or September 29th, because September 29th is the week before October 6th. So I think it's a question of which is better for the council or which is better for staff. And I'm not sure it matters which one, but no matter what, there's a back-to-back because Rosh Hashanah starts on the one we would normally do. I object to taking out the August 4th meeting. I object every year. It's a dispute Lynn and I have. We're supposed to have 2. I don't object to taking out the one in July because we generally do 3 in June. So I think of that last June one as the second July one, in a sense, because of budget issues. But in 6 years, we've only managed to eliminate that August meeting once this past year. Next year, it's the end of a term. Things will be coming up. If we don't want to have long meetings, it might be worth having an August 4th meeting. That doesn't mean we can't cancel it later if for some reason our agenda is clear. But I would rather have it on the schedule and cancel it than have it not on the schedule and need to put it on and not be able to get quorum because no one thought it was going to happen. I've always think of it better to be on the schedule and get a treat by canceling it than to try and find a way to put it in when no one's planned for it. So I'd rather put it in to start with.
Are there any other comments with regard to that particular issue? The charter requires that we meet once a month. The practice of the
Our
council,
rules say twice a month, though.
our practice is that we meet twice a month based on our rules. Pam, you have your hand up. All right, so right now, the motion, I have not put a motion on the floor, but I can put a motion on the floor, and then we can add in the August 4th as an amendment. So let's,
If there are no objections to the meeting, adding the meeting on August 4th, then you could just make that as part of your proposed motions.
okay. So we're going to add a meeting for August 4th, 2024. In the past, we have listed behind that if needed. 2025, I'm sorry. Are there any other questions or comments on that? Okay. To adopt the 2025 Town Council meeting schedule as presented at the meeting on December 2nd, 2024. Is there a second?
Brian, second.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Haneke?
Is the presented including the August 4th or not?
It does.
Okay.
And September 15, that's what I had on the other page. So it was a mistake that it was left as the 29th.
So September 29th is not on this.
Yes, it should be September 8 and 15, unless there are objections.
Okay. All right. And we'll change the note, not to worry. All right, given that, we're going to have a quick roll call. I've lost where, Andy Steinberg, we'll start with you.
Yes.
Anna Devlin Gothier,
Aye.
Councillor Ette,
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer's aye, Councillor Haneke,
Aye.
Bob Hegner,
Aye.
Councillor Lord,
Aye.
Pam Rooney,
Yes.
Councillor Ryan,
Aye.
Kathy Shane is not absent, and everyone else is absent, so it's 9 votes in favor, none opposed. We are going to move on to our next agenda item, which is the appointment. And I'm going to put a motion on the table, seek a second, and then ask for questions. Councillor Haneke, you have your hand up.
The first motion should be to waive, even though it's not on the motion sheet as written.
Thank you. The motion is to waive. I'm going to ask the
Town
Sure.
council, it's to waive town council rules of procedure, rule 8.6 for the town manager appointment of the fire chief.
That's the motion. I make the motion. Is there a second?
Second, Rooney.
Okay. Are there any questions about the waiver? The waiver does require that 9 people be present. Okay. Nine ayes. Okay, we will begin the waiver vote with Anna Devlin Gothier,
Aye.
Councillor Ette,
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer's an aye, Councillor Haneke,
Aye.
Bob Hegner,
Aye.
Councillor Lord,
Aye.
Pam Rooney,
Yes.
Councillor Ryan,
Aye.
Kathy Shane is not here, Andy Steinberg.
Aye.
And please note Jennifer Taub has joined us. Jennifer, can you hear us?
Yes.
And your vote?
Yes.
Thank you. So now we move to the actual motion. The actual motion is to approve the town manager appointment of Lindsay Strongbum as fire chief effective immediately. Is there a second?
Second, Devlin Gothier.
Thank you. And I'm going to begin the vote in this case with Councillor Ette.
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer's an aye. Counselor Haneke,
Aye.
Bob Hagner,
Aye.
Counselor Lord,
Aye.
Pam Rooney,
Yes.
Counselor Ryan,
Aye.
Andy Steinberg,
Aye.
Jennifer Taub,
Yes.
Anna Devon Gothier.
Aye.
It is unanimous. We'd like to congratulate Chief Strungo. So we have approved the minutes. Let me just get my notes here. We've approved the minutes. That's not where we are. We are committee and liaison reports. CRC. Pam Rooney, any? Go ahead.
I closed my report. Yes, CRC has been working on solar bylaw. It is switching gears tomorrow night to discuss University Drive overlay. The meeting notice begins at 6 p.m., not the usual time. And I think that's the gist of it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Elementary School Building Committee, neither Kathy Shane nor Alicia Walker are here. Paul, is there any update on the status on the school?
No, that we're still awaiting word from the Attorney General's office.
Good boy. Thank you. Finance Committee, Bob?
Nothing more to report. We've said
Okay.
enough.
GOL, Anna?
Pretty much gave my report. Thank you. We're
Great.
meeting Thursday.
Great. Thank you. See you on Thursday. Jones Library Committee, Pam Rooney?
I have no report.
Paul, is there anything else? Okay. TSO, Andy?
Yes, as noted, we are not meeting this week. We are meeting next week on the 12th, but at a different time. Is a joint meeting with the two other committees, the Transportation Advisory Committee and the Disability Access Advisory Committee, to receive the answers from Paul from Guilford and from the the engineering firm that assisted in development process about the proposal that they made, other proposals that are possibilities that were considered, why they made the proposal that they made, and to respond to the questions that were provided that you've seen previously. That meeting is capped at an hour and a half. We are probably going to try and convene 15 minutes or so earlier, even a little, so that we can consider any town manager committee appointments that need to be dealt with at the next council meeting. We're then going to actually have a regular meeting at our regular time on the following Thursday, the 19th, and that will give the committee an opportunity to talk about what it heard at the December 12th meeting, and to talk about the next steps, including the outreach that we think will need to be done to the community to get community comments on what is a pretty major restructuring of a road that a lot of people rely on. So those are the things that we're working on most immediately. We are continuing to work on the consideration of the Transportation and Parking Commission. And I'm not sure. I think that it's probably going to be in January before the next council that TSO recommendation can be made about the creation of the commission and issues that we see as being significant, which may include the scope of the activities that would be referred to the commission and membership.
Okay. Counselor Haneke, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just surprised to hear that CRC was at 6 PM tomorrow. Were we supposed to already get a Zoom link? Because I haven't received any. And that's a change in our regular meeting time. I can make it, but are we changing our regular meeting time to start at 6 for the rest of the year so I can move my calendar? Or is it just this meeting?
This is mistake number 2 in terms of the hour. Because last week or last time, we also met at 6 o'clock to accommodate somebody's schedule. We inadvertently continued the hearing to tomorrow at that same time. So it was completely a mistake. I hope to never repeat that mistake again.
Just trying to make sure, trying to figure out if I needed to change more of the numbers. It's good to hear it tonight because I wouldn't have logged on till 6:30. And I have not gotten the Zoom link yet, so I don't know whether I'm the only one that hasn't seen that Zoom link or not.
Okay. Are there any liaison reports? Jennifer?
Yes, well, since I'm here, the Council on Aging has been working with, the Amherst Senior Center, but I'm giving this as the liaison to the Council on Aging. They have been working with Amherst College students to do a beautiful mural on the wall in one of the rooms in the Senior Center, and that will be unveiled a week from tomorrow on Tuesday, December 10th, and the program is between 9 and 11, so you're invited and encouraged to come between those hours. Thank you.
Great. Are there any other questions of committee or any of the reports? The minutes were approved. We'll move on to the town manager's report. Paul?
You have a written report, which is pretty extensive. You also just note the winter farmers market begins on this Saturday from 10 to 2 at the Banks Community Center. And then you already mentioned the Merry Maple, which is a big event this on Friday.
Are there questions of the town manager? Councillor Lord?
Thank you. I believe this is where I would insert this statement. Councillor Walker gave me a statement that she wishes me to read during this meeting.
Is that for, I think that's for councillor comments.
Okay, my bad. She said either here or councillor comments. I can wait. I can wait.
Is it a question regarding the town manager's report?
It is regarding, it's not a question. Hold on.
Okay.
I will wait. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Ette.
So this is a question regarding the vote last meeting where we were supposed to allocate funds for roads and sidewalks. I'm wondering, since that didn't pass, does the town manager have any desire to recommend maybe lower funds for roads and sidewalks?
I did present a request for funds and the council did not approve it. So that's where it stands.
Did you have a follow-up question?
The council could.
Could the council request perhaps the amount didn't pass, but maybe the council supposes that something lower could pass? Could the council reach out to you for a recommendation for that amount? Could you get some direction from the council?
Here's the question. Can the council on a future agenda have an item where it would request the town manager to submit a financial order for a different amount of money for roads and sidewalks? The answer is yes. We can do that.
Point of order.
Yes,
A counselor would need to propose that and ask you to place it on the agenda
that is correct.
for a meeting. Okay.
Okay. Are there any other questions of the town manager regarding the town manager's report? Okay. There'll be a written report from me next meeting. Future agenda items include the discussion of the role of the president and the vice president. The items left from this week, which are the financial guidelines and the town manager's goals. And in addition to that is the letter that I took off the agenda, and whether or not we have anything back from Finance Committee regarding the financial order for sidewalks, for sidewalk equipment. I don't know the TSO will be ready with any kind of recommendation regarding the Southeast Street quadruple roundabout. But the other roundabout on U Drive and Main Street, I'm assuming will be coming forward. And that is it. Are there any other requests? Yes, the roundabout at U Drive and Main Street. That's the one down by University Drive. I'm assuming that will be coming back to the council at the meeting on the 16th. That's not the overlay.
You said Main
No,
Street, but.
yeah,
I didn't,
Amity.
it's Amity Street. Thank you so much. I messed that up. It's Amity Street, right? And I believe that's a TSO, isn't it?
TSO already made a recommendation on that, and it has been written up in a prior report.
Okay, so we will bring that to, we missed that on this. No,
No, we had decided to hold it for December 16th.
right, okay, that will be on the December 16th agenda. Okay, sorry for the confusion about the street names. Okay, are there any other requests for future agenda items? George?
I would like to request as an agenda item for next time, a discussion on the use of free cash for roads and sidewalks and other possible eligible projects.
Okay. That was a formal request for the agenda, and I accept that formal request. Are there councillor comments? I believe that this might be the place, Councillor Lord. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm reading the statement on behalf of Councillor Walker as she could not be here today. These are her words. As I reflect on the ongoing impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, I want to remind us all of the disproportionate harm it has caused Black and Brown individuals and businesses worldwide. Amherst has been no exception. Marginalized residents and businesses in our community were already grappling with systemic inequalities, and the pandemic only exacerbated these challenges. The ARPA funds were specifically provided to municipalities like ours to help mitigate and address these hardships. It is our responsibility as a town to ensure these funds are distributed equitably, targeting those who were and continue to be most impacted. With the year drawing to a close and the deadline for dispersing ARPA funds quickly approaching, I strongly urge the town manager and my colleagues to reconsider any plans that would allow these funds to revert to free cash. While I understand the town has numerous priorities and obligations, ARPA funds were created for this very purpose, to address unmet needs arising from the pandemic. If we fail to utilize them as intended, how else will we meet these urgent and unaddressed needs? In particular, I ask the town manager to commit a substantial portion of the remaining ARPA funds to the Black Business Association of Amherst Area, BBAAA, ensuring that the Black and BIPOC owned businesses receive the relief and support they have long been denied. This is the right time to make the right decision. The ARPA funds present a rare and crucial opportunity for Amherst to make a tangible progress towards equity and justice. Let us not miss it. Thank you. Respectfully submitted, Councillor Walker. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other councillor comments? Okay. We do not have we are going to move into executive session. So I need a motion to move into executive session. Let's get the motions right.
May I?
Yes.
To convene in an executive session for the following purposes: in accordance with Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A2, to conduct strategy sessions and preparations for negotiations with non-union personnel, Town Manager Paul Bockelman, in accordance with MGL Chapter 38, Section 21A2, to conduct contract negotiations with non-union personnel, Town Manager Paul Bockelman. The
So the
council will or will not reconvene in open
we
session,
will not reconvene.
not reconvene.
So the motion that I do make that motion, is there a second?
Ryan, second.
Thank you. On your email, you will now receive a different link. That is the link that will move us into executive session and exclude any audience. And as we mentioned earlier, we will not return to open session this evening. Thank you.
We have to vote.
I'm sorry, we do have to vote. Thank you. All right, so on the vote, this is the vote to move into executive session. I'll begin with Councillor Ette.
Aye.
Lynn Griesmer is an aye. Councillor Haneke,
Aye.
Bob Bagner,
Aye.
Councillor Lord,
Aye.
Pam Rooney,
Yes.
Councillor Ryan,
Aye.
Andy Steinberg,
Aye.
Jennifer Taub,
Yes.
and Anna Devon Gothier.
Aye.
It's unanimous. So you zoom off of this and go back into the next one. Thank you.